In the Rotinus Empire, it is said that the phrase, "do you wish to die?" is a euphemism for mentioning the Grey family in front of a member of the Emblem family, marking a deep-rooted historical hatred between the two sides. The Emblem Knights, representing the sun and passion, are known for their valor and strength. Their power is drawn from the brilliance of the sun. In contrast, the Grey Knights stand like the moonlight, shouldering the responsibility of upholding noble dignity and grace. These two ancient factions have been in a state of irreconcilable competition and long-standing hostility. It was once believed that compatibility between the Emblems and the Greys was impossible, even if the world were to end. A man once stated this with such conviction when faced with his family's doubts. Although generations of nobles passed down this saying, confirming its impossibility, the day everyone thought would never come arrived sooner than the end of the world. People gathered in confusion before the sudden announcement, whispering amongst themselves. The astonishing news spread. The leader of the Emblem Knights and the leader of the Grey Knights had become friends as close as sisters, sparking widespread shock and skepticism among the populace. The shock was so profound that some began to pray, believing the end of the world had truly arrived. The reality, however, was that the two leaders, Melchia and Dana, had set aside their hatred and become allied sisters. In the midst of this deep friendship, the silver-haired leader of the Greys, Dana, proposed that their children be joined in marriage in the future as a symbol of harmony and peace between the two families. The red-haired leader of the Emblem Knights and Kerja's mother, Lady Melchia, immediately agreed to the proposal. This agreement was the reason why Kerja Emblem was betrothed to the Grey family at a young age. However, Kerja, who now appears on screen seething with anger, wearing a wedding dress over her military uniform, harbored a strong hatred for her fiancé, viewing him as the worst member of the Grey family. Her fiancé was none other than Enoch Grey, whom she had always considered her arch-nemesis and mortal enemy. Driven by fury, she threw the wedding dress to the ground, expressing her extreme indignation at this forced engagement. Her maid commented that Lady Kerja looked as if she were attending a funeral rather than an engagement ceremony, and hurriedly asked if she truly intended to complete the ceremony in her formal knight's uniform. Kerja coldly replied that she would not change, which greatly shocked the maid, who protested that a noble lady should not attend her engagement in such attire. Kerja sarcastically asked what was wrong with her formal uniform, arguing that it perfectly matched her hair color, which exasperated the maid into calling her name in despair. Kerja then proudly declared that wearing her uniform as the leader of the Emblem Knights was the highest respect she could offer on such an occasion. The maid sighed, saying she wouldn't stop her if she insisted, but she reminded Kerja of another matter. The maid tried to stop her from wearing her sword, asking in fear if she intended to attack Lord Enoch, to which Kerja implied she might if necessary. At that moment, the maid seriously asked if she truly understood how this marriage came to be. Kerja mockingly replied that the whole thing was just because their mothers wanted to show off their friendship. The maid, shocked by this response, reminded her that she had taken history lessons and shouldn't ignore the significance of the matter. With tears in her eyes, the maid, Jessia, tried to explain the historical importance of this engagement between the Emblem and Grey families and how foreign delegations had come to offer their congratulations. Kerja asked her why she was crying, and Jessia replied that everyone had waited a long time for this union and that they were saddened by Kerja's reckless behavior. Kerja sighed and told her she knew all about it, which aroused Jessia's suspicion. Kerja explained her cynical perspective, stating that while she acknowledged the history of conflict, she believed the reason so many people had gathered was that they found it amusing to watch her and Enoch Grey, two mortal enemies and leaders, get married. She said this with a grin and a clenched fist, prompting Jessia to cry out her name in frustration once more. Kerja laughed and told Jessia not to worry too much, then calmly revealed that Enoch Grey had been missing in the forest of demonic beasts for a week, and if she was lucky, today's engagement ceremony would be canceled. Jessia felt a wave of panic upon hearing this, shouting at Kerja that she shouldn't say such things when her future fiancé might have met with misfortune. Before she could finish, a sudden noise from the door interrupted the atmosphere. Kerja looked somewhat puzzled, wondering what was wrong. Three knights fell to the floor in a heap, prompting Kerja to sternly question why they were there. The knights scrambled to explain themselves, their leader telling Kerja they had come to correct a false rumor that she would wear a dress to the ceremony, while another tried to shift the blame. Kerja ordered them to speak clearly and explain why her knights were in such a place. The older knight explained that since their leader had no desire for this engagement, they thought it best for her to go and rest, which shocked the maid, Jessia. The knights then excitedly revealed that they had prepared an escape route for her and were ready to escort her away at her command. Jessia, horrified by this suggestion, desperately asked if her lady was actually considering running away from her own engagement ceremony. Jessia reminded her that they were in the imperial banquet hall and that the emperor himself would be presiding over this extremely important ceremony. Kerja stated firmly that as the leader of the Emblem Knights, she could not do something as disgraceful as running away, but at the same time, she would not wait forever for Enoch, who might already be dead from hunting monsters. Suddenly, to everyone's surprise and delight, Kerja decided to proceed with the ceremony and get it over with immediately. Behind this decision, Kerja hid a cunning plan. She intended to quickly complete the ceremony in Enoch's absence, then use his non-attendance as a pretext to annul and get rid of the engagement. Kerja walked towards the bishop and called out to him. The bishop turned to welcome her and told her that everything for the ceremony was ready, though he seemed somewhat hesitant. The bishop, assuming she had come over out of concern for Lord Enoch, from whom there had been no news, suggested she pray for his safety, but she coldly replied that she'd rather beat him up herself than have him die in the forest of demonic beasts, and that it was none of her business. The bishop was surprised by her harsh response, but commented on her strong character. Kerja ignored his words and focused on her main request. She sternly demanded that he begin the ceremony immediately, leaving the bishop dumbfounded, wondering how she could proceed alone when her fiancé was still missing. Kerja insisted that the fool wouldn't be coming today and that it was rude to keep the guests waiting, so the bishop began to warn her of the consequences of such an act. Kerja finished his sentence for him, acknowledging that she knew completing the ceremony alone would render her unable to marry again, destined to be alone for the rest of her life. But she cheered internally, as she would be free once the engagement was annulled. Deeply moved and with tears in his eyes, the bishop completely misunderstood her intentions, believing she was displaying a profound, otherworldly desire, and immediately agreed to hold the ceremony. Kerja was ecstatic, realizing the bishop had greatly misunderstood her, but she didn't care as long as Enoch wasn't there to ruin her plan. As the trumpets sounded, the bishop asked Lady Kerja to step forward to officially begin the ceremony. As she walked forward, she heard the guests whispering, wondering about Lord Enoch's whereabouts, and eager to see him. She shared the same desire in her heart, but for a cynical reason. With a sly look, Kerja spoke to the guests in her mind, saying she heard everything and wondered how they could talk like that knowing how unlucky Enoch was. Pushing these thoughts aside, Kerja's only thought was to finish the ceremony quickly and go home to rest, until the shadow of a man appeared in the brightly lit entrance of the hall. Kerja turned to look, and shock was written on the faces of everyone present as they realized a newcomer had just returned from a dangerous place. Standing there was Sir Enoch Grey himself, showing signs of battle fatigue, his armor shattered and stained with blood. Enoch looked directly at Kerja with a slight smile and mockingly asked if she was really planning to finish the engagement without him. Kerja stood in shock, wondering how he had arrived in such a terrifying state as he walked towards her, telling her he had to come because he had a question to ask her, and calling her by her nickname, Sirius. Kerja erupted in anger and disgust, yelling at him that she had repeatedly warned him not to use that sickening nickname. Enoch ignored her outburst, firmly lifting her chin and saying some obscure words about losing memories, wondering how she could not recognize him when he was right in front of her, which added to her confusion and surprise. He cut her off before she could speak, saying that none of it mattered, and then moved closer to her. Kerja's eyes widened in absolute shock as she realized he was kissing her in front of everyone, unable to comprehend what was happening. Rage filled Kerja's heart as she felt Enoch Grey's kiss, cursing him in her mind for this insolent act. It wasn't just her. Her knights were also burning with anger at seeing their leader subjected to such an insult, harshly condemning the man for daring to touch their leader. In the midst of this chaos, Kerja remained in a state of shock, unable to believe that Enoch was kissing her at this very moment in front of everyone. Enoch pulled back slightly and, in a mocking tone, asked if she had missed him, leaving Kerja in a state of extreme confusion and turmoil, unable to speak. But the real shock came from a single word he whispered in her ear, "detective," which made her jump, asking in surprise what he meant by that. The word stirred a long-forgotten memory in Kerja's mind, a memory from the distant past, and even further back. It was her profession from her previous life, and she wondered in horror how this man could know such a secret. She asked him in a trembling voice how he knew that word. Enoch smiled, a smile in which she noticed a familiar look in his eyes, a look that awakened a terrifying realization about his true identity. As they say, enemies are bound to meet on a narrow road, and Kerja realized she wasn't meeting her enemy on a bridge, but in her engagement hall. This was her nemesis from her previous life. Her memories began to flood back, returning to the first day of her current life, a day that no one should be able to remember. She was a loving baby in her parents' arms. Her father praised her beauty, inherited from her mother Mel, proud of the child who would bear the Emblem name. Her parents had high hopes for her, believing she was the child who could end the long-standing feud between the Grey and Emblem families and lead them towards harmony. However, Kerja's memory of that day was crystal clear. Her loud cries were not those of a newborn, but an expression of the fact that she was not just a baby, but a Korean detective reincarnated into this new body. Her parents interpreted her crying as a sign of health and strength, rejoicing that their child would grow up to help many people. But in truth, her hysterical crying and violent movements, like pulling her mother's hair, were expressions of her shock and confusion at the strange situation she had suddenly found herself in. Her last memory before her birth was of chasing a criminal, not just any criminal, but her nemesis from her past life and the murderer of her parents. She had been running after him, shouting for him to stop, desperate to catch him. She was sure she had managed to grab him at the last moment, but that was her final memory before finding herself in this new world, leaving her with a deep sense of frustration, regret, and pain. Her cries as a baby were actually echoes of her rage and her desire to throw that criminal in prison, while her new parents thought her voice was as sweet as a canary's. And so, her new life began, surrounded by loving parents, but with a heart full of furious anger for letting her enemy escape justice. No one, not even her parents, could understand what their daughter, born with complete memories and an unspeakable sorrow, felt on her first day. As time went on, after the initial shock, Kerja began to entertain the idea that life in this new world might not be so bad, especially with the maids who lovingly cared for her and praised how small and beautiful she was. Perhaps because she had been reincarnated as a charming child, she started to feel that things might turn out well. She enjoyed the maid's exaggerated reactions to her every move and began to think that this life could indeed be pleasant and peaceful. But this peace was occasionally broken by the scolding of the head maid, who warned the others that the master could arrive at any moment. Despite this peaceful routine, after a few days of life, one thing began to worry and annoy Kerja. She heard the maids whispering, wondering if the master would come to see his wonderful granddaughter and how he could keep ignoring her. The source of this annoyance was her grandfather, the head of the Emblem family, who strongly opposed any reconciliation with the Grey family. Due to his opposition, he had banished her mother from the main palace and refused to recognize them as part of the Emblem family, which Kerja, as a child, didn't care much about. In fact, she was quite happy with the current situation. Unlike her past life filled with conflict and chases, all she wanted now was to lie down, play, and eat in peace. In the midst of her peace, a loud commotion suddenly erupted, with a maid scolding the others for not cleaning the place properly, ordering them to hurry because the master had chosen to come while the child's parents were away, which required special arrangements. A maid approached the child Kerja, who was awakened by the noise, wondering in her mind the reason for all the fuss. The maid hurriedly told Kerja that her grandfather, the head of the family, will be making an urgent visit soon, causing the child to babble some incomprehensible sounds as she tried to process the situation. The maid saw this visit as a chance for Kerja to win her grandfather's favor, pleading with her not to cry and assuring her of her natural beauty. A voice came, ordering everyone to line up, and the maid realized the grandfather had arrived. And Kerja also began to feel nervous, wondering what kind of man could inspire such awe. An imposing man walked in, and the servants, led by the butler, lined up to greet him. The grandfather appeared as a man with fiery red hair and a beard, dressed in a magnificent military uniform, and he asked in a stern tone for the whereabouts of his daughter, Melrisha. He was surrounded by a dark and terrifying aura, making Kerja immediately realize why he was said to be the most aggressive knight commander in history. From her cradle, her grandfather looked truly terrifying to her, and she was certain this was the man who hated her and rejected her existence. The butler tentatively stepped forward to introduce the child, saying she was Lady Kerja Emblem, and the grandfather erupted in fury. He roared in a thunderous voice, demanding to know who gave them the audacity to give the child the Emblem name without his permission. With his roar, an immense power emanated, causing the butler to cough up blood and fall to his knees, begging for mercy without even being touched. Kerja was deeply shaken, wondering how he could make him bleed without touching him. A red aura surrounded the grandfather, a testament to his terrifying power that left the butler helpless before him. Kerja remembered hearing that his swordsmanship surpassed human limits, but what she was seeing was beyond all her imagination. Fear gripped her, and she felt he was more terrifying than any armed criminal she had faced in her past life. But suddenly, the grandfather looked at her and asked relatively calmly if the child wasn't eating, noticing her small frame. The butler hurriedly assured him that the young lady was eating well, to which the grandfather just grunted. The grandfather turned to leave, muttering disdainfully how his daughter Melrisha had given birth to something like an anchovy, leaving Kerja shocked by the strange comparison. Kerja's attention turned to the butler, and she tried to ask him in baby talk if he was all right. The man understood her and was grateful for her concern. The butler reassured her and showed her a small vial of fake blood, explaining that he always carried it to gain sympathy in emergencies, one of the essential survival skills for a servant of the Emblem family. Kerja was impressed by his cunning, realizing this man possessed amazing survival skills. Since her grandfather hated her so much, Kerja decided she had to come up with a plan to deal with him. Just then, her mother, Melrisa, returned, calling for Kerja and asking about her father. The child smiled and babbled at her. The butler told her the master had just left, and Melrisha laughed cheerfully, saying he must have run away to avoid being caught praising his own granddaughter. Melrisha proudly declared that victory was hers, while the butler commented that the grandfather didn't even look back as he left. Melrisha, holding her daughter, asked if she wanted to know what really happened, while the butler confirmed that the grandfather had thoroughly lost this round. Melrisha revealed her simple plan. She had sent her father pictures of Kerja every day. Her goal was to make him see how his only granddaughter was growing day by day. Then, with a wink, she revealed her final trick. She had stopped sending the pictures only yesterday, which prompted him to rush over because he couldn't bear not seeing her for a single day. Melrisha laughed and declared her victory, while Kerja was in a daze, unable to believe that her stern, disowning grandfather who called her an anchovy had been defeated by this simple plan. The butler agreed that it was decisive proof of the master's affection for his granddaughter, and Melrisha happily asked her daughter if she was happy knowing how much her grandfather loved her. Kerja shed tears of anger, wondering in her mind how this could be a sign of love for a granddaughter and denouncing the truth she had heard. Her mother misunderstood her crying and hugged her lovingly, saying her smart child understood everything, while Kerja realized there was no communication between them at all. However, she soon had to admit to her grandfather's love. The signs of this love began to appear as the butler presented Kerja with lavish and rare dishes, including the heart of a totok and Merrick's liver soup, delicacies worth a fortune. The butler noticed her trembling and asked with concern if she was all right. Kerja realized in that moment that she did feel her grandfather's love, but this love was extremely exaggerated. The table was laden with countless delicacies from land and sea, making her secretly wish for this excessive generosity to stop. Unable to take it anymore, she fled from the table, shouting in her mind for her grandfather's love to stop, while the butler chased after her, trying to force her to eat more. Kerja screamed in frustration. How was she to know that her grandfather called her an anchovy because she really looked like one at the time, and she didn't realize that a greater trial was still waiting for her? In another scene, a lady from the Grey family held a small boy with white hair, showing him a picture of Kerja and introducing her as his future fiancé. The lady advised her son, Enoch, to always be gentle with Lady Kerja, but the little boy ignored the matter and threw her picture on the ground. This was Kerja's first intersection with the biggest headache of her life, her nemesis, Enoch. Years later, Kerja had grown into a young girl, the only daughter of the Emblem family, living in a magnificent palace. Her most favorite person was undoubtedly her father, She would call out to him as soon as she saw him, and he would respond gently, inviting her to his side. When he held her after she refused to eat anymore, he would comfort her with wisdom, saying that even the most delicious food becomes boring if you eat too much of it. Kurja felt incredibly happy, as her father understood her so well. Most of all, his outstanding looks and warm smile filled her heart with joy. This love was so mutual that the servants desperately tried to persuade her to eat a little more of the 12-course meal the chef had prepared especially for her. Kurja loved listening to the stories her father read to her, even the cliched ones, and her father noticed her passion for reading and was very happy about it. During one of these quiet moments, as she was enjoying her father's company, the butler interrupted them to inform Lord Benedict that the master had arrived. Her father noted that he had come early today and concluded that he must have come because he missed Kurja. But for Kurja, it was completely different. Just as there are people you love, there are also people you hate, and her grandfather, who claimed to love her, was at the top of that list. His style and behavior were extremely arrogant and domineering. Her father noticed her annoyance, asked if she found her grandfather uncomfortable, and assured her that if she listened carefully, everything he said stemmed from his love for her. He asked her to trust him and pay close attention to her grandfather this time, which made Kurja wonder if what her father said was true. She began to think about it, remembering that all those delicious foods were incredibly expensive, and some even had to be caught by hand. She realized then that her grandfather, the old man, must have been running around to catch these delicacies for her. But her grandfather's next words dispelled all her doubts. He looked at her with resentment and said that her arms and legs still looked like rotten branches. Kurja was shocked by this insult, while her father welcomed his father's arrival. The grandfather continued his scolding, complaining that he had sent her so many good things, yet she greeted him with a long face, and that she was as rude as her mother. Kurja erupted in anger, shouting at him in a childish voice and describing him in her mind as a damn bastard. Her father whispered in her ear, explaining that the master was worried because she hadn't gained weight, but was actually saying she looked like her mother, Melchior, and was very beautiful, while Kurja commented in her mind that her father's interpretation was wrong. The grandfather called out his name, Benedict, and asked if it was time for Melrush's daughter to walk. Benedict gave an affirmative answer, asserting that she was now walking very well. Kurja was shocked and very embarrassed, wondering if her grandfather had come over so early just to see her take her first steps. The grandfather repeated his question about whether she could really walk, and her father confirmed that she had good balance and could even run. Rage filled the grandfather's heart as he realized he had missed his granddaughter's first steps. Everything around Kurja began to shake, and she wondered if it was an earthquake, while her father tried to calm her. It was clear that the grandfather was extremely disappointed at not having witnessed that important moment, and anger towards another person filled his heart. The grandfather rushed out with astonishing speed, shouting the name Jed Grey. Both her father and Kurja were stunned by this superhuman speed, with the child wondering how a human could move like that. She would later learn that what had happened was that when Jed Grey, the head of the Grey family, learned that she had taken her first steps, he deliberately sent a message to her grandfather to taunt him, expressing his joy at not having missed his grandson Enoch's first steps and hoping that her grandfather wouldn't miss Kurja's either, which sent her grandfather into a rage. Kurja, drinking her soup, began to be convinced by her father's words that perhaps her grandfather was just harsh with his words, but actually cared for her and cherished her, just acting strangely because he didn't know how to express his feelings. Kurja's family was heading to the Grey Duchy, the home of Enoch's family. Although Kurja was still in a child's body, she realized with her adult mind that what was happening was important. Her parents were praising her beauty in an exaggerated manner, making her beg them in her mind to stop, as all the words they used meant the same thing. Her father jokingly claimed he kept checking her back for angel wings because he was afraid another angel would come and take her away, which embarrassed Kurja with these exaggerated actions. Her mother revealed there was a reason for wearing such lavish clothes today, and she and her father jokingly worried that Enoch would fall in love with Kurja at first sight and suffer from lovesickness. Kurja suddenly realized that today was the day she would meet that boy, her fiancé, Enoch Grey. She felt strange and anxious. If they met at this age and grew up together, would there be any romantic feelings when they grew up? It seemed wrong. She decided she had to do something to make them go home instead of completing this meeting. But before she could act, a maid announced that Lady Dana Grey and her husband, Lord Edward Grey, along with the young Lord Enoch Grey, had arrived. Kerja was shocked by their sudden arrival, and just then, Lady Dana walked in, eagerly calling out to her friend, Melchia. The two friends embraced warmly, with Melchia expressing how much she had missed Dana, saying she would have dropped her work if she had known their separation would be so long. Kerja watched this scene, feeling that all the rumors about them being rivals seemed insignificant in the face of such genuine friendship. Her mother and Aunt Dana seemed truly happy. Melchia apologized to her friend, saying she was so happy to see her that she almost forgot the purpose of their meeting today, which was to introduce her precious daughter. Melchia introduced her daughter, saying, "This is Circia." Dana expressed great admiration for the child's outstanding beauty and noted that she looked exactly like her mother. Dana jokingly said that she wanted to take the child home with her right now, and Circia's father jokingly refused the request. Melchia asked Dana to introduce Enoch to her as well, and Dana immediately agreed. Dana called her husband, Edward, to bring the child over. Edward stepped forward, holding a white-haired baby, and introduced him. "This is Enoch." Circia looked at her fiancé, who was still a baby, and felt there was something strange in his eyes. She wasn't sure if it was a real feeling or just an illusion. Her father encouraged her to greet him, but just looking at him, she felt a wave of nausea and even wanted to vomit. Her mother and Dana noticed the tense atmosphere between the two children and found the scene both cute and amusing. Dana asked her son to greet Miss Circia. Circia felt a strange sense of dizziness that intensified whenever she looked at his face. Suddenly, without any warning, a strong desire to punch him rose within her, and in fact, she did punch him right in the face. Circia was shocked by her own actions, unable to believe she had actually hit him. In her mind, she justified her action, feeling that his face was just asking to be punched. Her mother and Dana saw this and screamed in shock and horror. Her father and Enoch's father were completely stunned, unable to believe what had just happened. The question in their minds was, did Enoch really just get punched by Circia? Enoch began to cry, and for a moment Circia thought he wanted to respond to her blow, but little Enoch glared at her angrily and quickly rushed towards her. Circia commented that the little guy actually had the guts to do so. Enoch prepared to strike back, but Circia was faster than him. Circia easily dodged the punch, so Enoch lost his balance and fell to the ground in pain. Circia felt very satisfied. Her skills as a former detective made dealing with a baby very easy. The adults watched what happened, falling into silence and shock. Dana rushed to pick up her crying son, scolding him for his behavior towards Circia. Circia commented that, for a baby, Enoch seemed to have a very bad temper. Circia nervously began to try to convince her mother that what had just happened was not intentional, but her mother scolded her sternly, asking how she could hit Enoch and knock him to the ground. Circia claimed he fell on his own. Her mother reminded her that everyone was looking forward to and preparing for this meeting, and she couldn't just end it like this, ordering her to immediately apologize to Enoch and make up. Melchia turned to Dana and told her that Circia wanted to apologize to Enoch. Dana replied with a smile that there was no need for that. Melchia told her daughter that as an apology, she must blow on the spot where he was hit to make him feel better. But Circia felt nauseous again just by looking into Enoch's eyes. Instead of blowing, Circia threw up directly onto Enoch's face. Circia realized at that moment that she might be the first woman in the history of the continent to punch her fiancé and then throw up on him during their first meeting. After that disastrous meeting, the Emblem family returned home. Lord Benedict helped his wife Melchia out of the carriage. Her father noticed his wife seemed distracted and asked if she was all right. She gave an affirmative answer, while Circia babbled at her. Circia thought to herself how much her mother had looked forward to this day, only for it to be ruined by her, which made Circia feel a deep sense of guilt for disappointing her family. Suddenly, her grandfather's voice rang out, loudly calling for his beautiful granddaughter, which surprised her parents. The grandfather ran over with a face full of happiness, announcing that he heard she had punched that bastard from the Grey family in the face, calling her his beautiful granddaughter, who was his pride and joy. Sersia was stunned by this, wondering in surprise if this was really her grandfather. It seemed every family member was ashamed and frustrated by Sersia's actions, except for one, her grandfather. He was proud of her, holding her in his arms and spinning her around in extreme happiness. Sometime after that incident, her maid Jija was looking for Sersia in the garden, promising to catch her for sure. Sersia saw her and thought to herself how she had caught up so quickly. Jija told Miss Sersia that the banquet was about to begin. Jija gently scolded her, warning that her dress would get dirty and reminding her that this was the first children's dress designed by Madame de Blair. She told her the dress cost as much as an entire house. Sersia felt guilty and apologized for just having ruined a house. Jija told her that she was a professional at causing trouble, so Sersia apologized again, explaining that she didn't mean to. Sersia had run away that day because she didn't want to see the stupid face of Enoch as the Grey family was visiting them. As she hid, she felt satisfied for successfully avoiding them. She had seen Enoch a few more times since their first meeting, and he always made her feel uncomfortable, so she hated him. Suddenly, she heard the sound of running water nearby and felt happy because she had found a stream. Running away had made her very thirsty, so she decided to drink some water. She thought to herself that the problems with Enoch and the family were truly painful and wondered about the secret to his popularity among other girls. She decided to drink some water and rest in the sun, wishing she could be free like this forever. But a sudden voice interrupted her, asking what she was doing here. Scaring her so much she jumped up and panically asked the speaker's identity. The speaker was none other than Enoch himself, and Sersia angrily asked what he was doing here. He coldly replied that he was hiding because he didn't want to see her. She angrily retorted that she was here for the same reason. She yelled in his face that he was very annoying. He calmly replied, likewise. She demanded that he leave because she was here first. He replied with the same logic that he was here before her. Enoch concluded that, according to her logic, she was the one who should leave and then leisurely lay down on the grass. Sersia was furious at his debating skills, wondering why, despite having an adult's mind, she always lost arguments against him. As she glared at him angrily, she noticed something hanging from his waist. She approached him and asked in surprise what that thing was and why he had it. Enoch asked in surprise what she was talking about, while Sersia couldn't believe what she was seeing. She thought in shock, is that a real sword? He replied that his master, who was his grandfather, gave it to him. She asked him why he was wearing a sword and if he was learning swordsmanship. He replied, of course, because he is from the Grey family, and if he wants to become a knight, he must learn swordsmanship. He then turned the question back on her, asking if she, as a member of the Emblem family, would also learn swordsmanship and if she hadn't started yet. Sersia admitted she had a natural interest in swords because she came from a family of knights. She explained that their house was full of swords, but this was the first time she had seen one up close, and she thought it was very cool and wished she had one too. Although she was annoyed that Enoch got a sword before her, she thought to herself that her detective career had already exhausted her, and learning swordsmanship would surely mean her new life would once again be difficult and full of conflict. Enoch asked her again why she hadn't started yet. She replied that it's difficult and painful, and she would rather not learn. Enoch was shocked by her answer, grabbed her, and yelled how she could not learn swordsmanship. He angrily reminded her that she is the sole heir of the Emblem family, and it is her duty to learn swordsmanship, and threatened her that if she doesn't, Sersia coldly interrupted him, warning him that if he got any closer, she would punch him and throw up on him again, and told him to stay away if he didn't want that to happen. Enoch immediately backed away, which made Sersia realize she had given him psychological trauma. Seeing the distance between them, she felt a sense of relief. Then he asked her again if she really never intended to learn swordsmanship. She sharply replied that she had already told him she didn't want to. Enoch exploded, saying she would become boring that way. Sersia was confused, wondering why she would become boring. He replied with a sly smile that she would become weak, and the Emblem family would decline without a future knight. Sersia was shocked by his hurtful words. A fury took over her, and she yelled in his face, asking if he was done with his disrespectful words. It was reasonable to be angry at his insult to her family, but at that moment she ignored the fact that Enoch, despite his mature mind, was still just a small child, and she punched him hard. Enoch fell to the ground under her heavy blow, and after she nearly beat him to death, she found herself being punished by her mother. Her mother looked at her carrying a bucket of water and said that the beating Enoch received was much heavier than this punishment. Her mother asked if she understood her mistake. Circia gave an affirmative answer, while feeling pain in her arms and angrily thinking that her mother didn't even ask why she had hit him. She thought to herself, it was that bastard who provoked her first, and his arrogant behavior was asking for it. Her mother interrupted her thoughts, sternly asking why she looked sullen and if she didn't feel any remorse at all. Before she could answer, her grandfather rushed into the room, proudly asking if she really hit that Grey family bastard. He lifted her high up, declaring that his granddaughter had achieved a glorious victory. Her mother desperately called his name, and he replied that their granddaughter was allowed to teach a member of the Grey family a lesson from time to time. Circia felt deeply moved. Although she knew she did wrong, her grandfather unconditionally taking her side touched her heart. She wished her mother would also ask her reason for doing it, and started to cry, which worried her grandfather. He asked her the reason for her tears while wiping them away. She told him that Enoch had described her as pathetic because she refused to learn swordsmanship. She continued, saying that Enoch said the Emblem family would decline, and as a member of the family, she has a dignity she must defend. Her grandfather laughed proudly, hugging her and saying she was indeed a glorious member of the Emblem family, and he was proud of her, the youngest member of the Emblem family in the world. He proudly declared that thanks to her, they had successfully defended their honor from that bastard of the Grey family. That night, Circia lay in bed feeling wrong because her mother didn't understand her feelings, and her arms were sore from carrying the water buckets. Suddenly, she sensed movement in the room and wondered in surprise about the identity of the intruder. Circia decided to pretend to be asleep, as she didn't want to talk to anyone at that moment. It was her mother who entered, whispering that her daughter was asleep. The mother sat beside her, gently holding her arm, thinking to herself if she was upset because she had scolded her without asking what happened, and expressed her apology for the pain and sadness her daughter felt. She told her that she heard Dana had also scolded Enoch severely, so much so that the mature child had run away from home. As she spoke, she placed something cool on Circia's arm, which Circia felt was a pain-relieving patch. The mother admitted to herself that she and Dana had gone too far in their pursuit of harmony between the two families and ended up hurting their children. She kissed her daughter on the forehead, apologized to her, and insisted that she was more precious than anything. She told her sleeping daughter that the reason she was angry at Enoch's words today was most likely because the pride of the Emblem family had already begun to sprout in her heart, a pride in strength, courage, and justice. She looked at her lovingly, said her daughter had grown a lot, and wished her a good night's sleep. She whispered, "I love you," before leaving. After her mother left, Circia opened her eyes, and a wonderful feeling welled up in her heart upon hearing her mother say she loved her. It was an affectionate and warm expression. This triggered a deep fear within her. She remembered that her parents in her previous life were not good people. They often beat her and later died in an accident, and she ended up in an orphanage. But fortunately, it wasn't long before she met new adoptive parents. They promised to help her after she had suffered so much and asked her to come with them. They promised to cherish and value her. She was so happy then, feeling full of hope. She believed she had spent so long alone just to finally meet them. But on the night she was supposed to go to their home, she found herself at a crime scene. She saw a body being carried away on a stretcher and glimpsed her adoptive father's watch on the victim's wrist. She tried to go in, but the police stopped her and had someone take her away. She cried out for her parents, but they couldn't keep their promise. She later heard they had committed suicide, but she didn't believe it. It didn't make sense for two people to plan a suicide while also planning to adopt a child. So she vowed to uncover the truth, and that was why she had never experienced parental love. At an age when she should have been learning the meaning of such love, she had no parents. She was afraid that her mother in this life, being a good person, might also disappear. This feeling of having a mother who cared so much for her was something she had never experienced in her previous life. She said she was scared, but also very happy, thinking that maybe all the pain she had gone through was so that she could be reborn in this world and meet this family. She felt refreshed and full of energy. Although she was angry at Enoch, she still felt resentful, thinking who did he think he was, daring to call her pathetic just because he was holding a wooden sword and learning a little swordsmanship. After venting her anger, she felt relieved and much better. Circia heard a rustling sound and wondered if a mouse had slipped into the garden. She looked down from the balcony and saw a shadow moving in the dark garden. A figure slowly became visible in the moonlight. For some reason, she felt this mouse looked very familiar. The person was kneeling and pulling something from the ground. When he saw her, he asked in surprise why she was there, and she returned the same question. Enoch replied in confusion that he was pulling weeds. He seemed a bit flustered looking at her, which piqued her curiosity. Sertia turned to leave, telling him to take his time, but he called out to her. She told him to just say what he wanted to say and informed him that the news of him running away had spread and they would be looking for him soon. She noticed his hesitation and wondered about the reason, as it wasn't like him. Enoch admitted he had gone too far today and offered an apology. He explained that he understood her anger at his insult to the Emblem family, and when she said she wouldn't learn swordsmanship, he felt an urge to apologize. Sertia approached him and placed her hand on his face to check his temperature, wondering what he was doing. Enoch was startled by her action. She said his temperature was normal, which made him even more confused, and his face turned bright red. He suddenly pushed her away, yelling for her to back off. Sertia told him she was just worried about him. He then apologized, as he didn't mean to push so hard. Sertia was confused, as he was acting very strangely today. Enoch told her that this counted as canceling out the punch she gave him earlier, and they were even. She suggested he stop apologizing and go back quickly, reminding him that Aunt Dana was leaving for Crichton tomorrow, and if he didn't hurry, he wouldn't see her for a long time. But Enoch replied that he didn't care. Sertia concluded that he was also angry at his mother, which was why he ran away, but he angrily denied it. He complained about the injustice, wondering who he was practicing the sword for, and how his mother could get angry at him on this day of all days, since she was leaving for a whole month. He sat on the ground sadly, saying it was more than he could bear. Sertia realized he was both angry and sad. She approached him and asked if he was crying. He denied it and told her to go away. She mocked him, saying he was crying just because his mother scolded him, and he exploded in anger, revealing to her that his mother was kicked out of the imperial palace just to secure his engagement to her. He told her that he practiced swordsmanship day and night until his palms were sore, all in the hope of living with his mother again. Enoch continued with tears in his eyes, explaining that he couldn't stop training because he had to defeat someone from the Emblem family, as his grandfather had promised to let his mother return to the palace if he achieved this victory. Then he suddenly stood up, looked at Sertia with determination, and asserted that this was why she had to learn swordsmanship, because he had to be the first Grey to defeat an Emblem in a duel. He pleaded with her to take up the sword, as it was the only way he could live with his mother again. At that moment, Sertia understood why he was so angry when she said she wouldn't learn swordsmanship. It was his only means of living with Aunt Dana again. He asked if she understood his feelings now, and she denied it, but then wondered, even if she learned swordsmanship, what made him assume he would be the winner. He replied with arrogance and confidence that it was obvious, because he was a genius born with a talent for the sword. He told her she had no chance of surpassing him because she didn't even plan to learn, just eating and playing all day. Sertia's anger flared at his insolence. She thought to herself that while she wasn't sure about his talent for swordsmanship, she was absolutely sure he had an extraordinary talent for annoying people. As she raised her fist in front of him, Enoch flinched in fear, asking if she wanted to turn into a monster. So Sertia told him she was just holding back her temper because her mother would get angry if she hit him again. But she pointed her finger at him and warned him to just wait, asserting that she would never lose to him. Unexpectedly, Enoch's eyes lit up with excitement, declaring that this was how a real rival should be. From that moment on, a fierce and brutal competition began between Sertia and Enoch. Time passed, and Sertia began to train with unparalleled seriousness. She struck the training dummy with all her might, calling out the names of the targets: head, waist, back, and neck. Her instructor, Sir Lawrence, interrupted her, pleading with her in a tired voice to stop. Sertia stopped, panting, and answered her instructor. Lawrence scolded her sternly, explaining that he had her practice slashing, not smashing, to which she naively asked if there was a difference between the two. Lawrence felt hopeless, realizing she truly had the blood of the Emblem family, as she would burst into flames at the mere mention of the name Grey. He looked at her seriously and asked if she really wished to defeat someone from the Grey family. She replied with passion and confidence that she certainly did, and even wanted to crush Enoch with her sword. The instructor warned her that if she continued to swing her sword wildly like this, she would inevitably lose. This terrified Cercia, as defeat was the one thing she could not accept. The instructor yelled at her, ordering her to run 5 more laps around the training ground, which she tearfully agreed to. She hated losing to Enoch, that fool who ignored her and spoke ill of her, more than she hated death itself. All she really wanted was to give him a good beating. But because they both came from 2 ancient families, people's perception of this competition was completely different. Her parents were anxious about this intense rivalry. As for her grandfather, he saw the conflict as a certain victory against the Grey family, proudly declaring that victory would undoubtedly belong to his granddaughter. Soon, it became the talk of the town, with rumors that Cercia Emblem had challenged a member of the Grey family to a duel, and people wondered if the supposed reconciliation between the 2 families was true. The rumors evolved into Cercia and Enoch competing for the position of the next Imperial Guard Knight, and that the Emblem family would never yield this honor to the Grey family. People celebrated this rekindled conflict as if it were a festival, and so their competition became a source of entertainment and gossip for everyone, while the Emperor listened from afar. Emperor Martian Leopoldo Rotinus was watching the developments with great interest from his throne. He had received news that Cercia Emblem had begun learning swordsmanship. One of his advisors confirmed the news, explaining that the rivalry between the Emblem and Grey families had been reignited, to which the Emperor commented that it had been a long time since something had appeared to amuse his subjects. Based on this, the Emperor decided to have both Cercia and Enoch participate in the upcoming hunting competition, which shocked his advisor, who reminded him they were only 7-year-old children. The advisor tried to dissuade the Emperor from his decision, pointing out that sending them to the Metro Forest was extremely dangerous. But the Emperor interrupted him with a sharp gaze, coldly asking since when he needed anyone's permission. The advisor, realizing his mistake, hurriedly knelt and apologized for his presumption. The Emperor accepted his apology and then ordered him to immediately go and bring someone over. The advisor nervously inquired about the identity of the person in question. The Emperor explained that since the Grey and Emblem families were fighting fiercely to decide who would become the next Imperial Guard Knight, it was only right to give them a chance to meet the Crown Prince. You must be curious too. The Emperor commented that the young Crown Prince was eager to know who, between Emblem and Grey, would be the most loyal sword to him in the future. He also wanted to know which of them would be the first to sacrifice their life for him. Meanwhile, Cercia's mother, Lady Melcia, was expressing her concerns to her father, wondering if all this hard training was really necessary. The grandfather dismissed her fears, asserting that Cercia was fine, while her mother commented that Cercia was only 7 and could get injured from overtraining. The grandfather reassured her that the Emblem bloodline was not so fragile, and that his granddaughter's true motivation was her wild desire to win, which surpassed mere effort. Melcia worriedly told him that someone had been feeding Cercia information about Enoch, making her constantly determined to surpass him at all costs. She angrily wondered who was doing this and threatened to teach them a lesson, while her grandfather sipped his tea, feigning ignorance. A few days ago, Cercia's instructor, Lawrence, was still urging her to run 1 more lap, asserting that fatigue was just an illusion and she shouldn't be afraid of muscle loss. He encouraged her to enjoy the pain, as it was the only proof of progress and growth. At that moment, the grandfather whispered in the instructor's ear, telling him that Enoch had already run 10 laps and mastered the horizontal slash, asking about Cercia's progress. The instructor's enthusiasm was ignited, and he yelled at Cercia that Enoch had run a full 10 laps. As soon as Cercia heard Enoch's name, she burst into a rage, shouting his name and mustering all her remaining energy. Back in the present, the grandfather asked to be excused on the grounds of urgent work, so Melcia asked him to bring some water for her daughter before he left, and he agreed to her request. But the butler interrupted them, so the grandfather seized the opportunity to rush out. The mother asked the butler what he wanted. The butler told her that a letter had arrived from the Imperial Palace, an invitation to the upcoming hunting competition. Melcia was surprised, explaining that they had already received an invitation, but the butler explained that he had brought this one to her first. He revealed to her that this invitation was not addressed to her, but directly to Miss Cercia Emblem. Melcia was extremely shocked, wondering what it meant to invite her daughter to the Imperial hunting competition. The butler then told her that after delivering the letter, he saw the messenger heading towards the Grey family's territory. Melchia immediately realized that Enoch must have received a similar invitation, and the butler thought so too. Anxiety filled her heart as she wondered what the Emperor was thinking, realizing there must be some reason for pitting the two children against each other. She concluded that the Emperor must be dissatisfied with the state of harmony between their two families, but she didn't understand why he would resort to such an extreme measure as inviting them to a hunting competition. Melchia worriedly thought about sending her daughter to the Metro Forest, which was inhabited by magical beasts. Despite her premonition that something terrible was about to happen, her grandfather was outside happily playing with his granddaughter. Cercia's laughter filled the place, and happiness radiated from the child's face. The family arrived at the territory of Count Condria's in a luxurious carriage, where the competition would be held. Cercia's father, Benedict, tried to soothe his worried wife, insisting that the Emperor would not send their child to a dangerous place, and that the magical beasts in that forest were of a low level, and the area assigned to Cercia had been completely cleared and was safe. Then, he looked at his daughter from the carriage window, asking his wife to trust in their daughter's abilities. Meanwhile, a group of young girls were weeping, expressing their disgust for Cercia's caustic behavior and their desire to join Enoch in the hunting competition, with some even wondering why Cercia didn't just give up her engagement to him. Cercia, extremely annoyed, covered her ears and pleaded with them to be quiet, then sternly told them that if they really wanted to see Enoch, they could participate in the competition themselves. One of the girls screamed that she didn't want to do that. She just wanted to marry Enoch, and it was unfair that Cercia was the only one with that opportunity. Cercia, enraged, asked if they really thought she was doing all this because she wanted to marry Enoch, and asserted that a little brat like him was not her type at all. She then loudly declared that she would rather marry her own father than him, which silenced the girls in shock. The girls confusedly began to inquire about her father, so Cercia told them that if they saw him, they would find that Enoch couldn't compare at all, and told them to look behind them. Then she gently stroked her hair, assuring her that her day would be wonderful. But a moment later, Josiah suddenly shook her mistress awake forcefully, telling her to get up quickly, which confused a sleepy Cercia. Shock and intense admiration filled their hearts, and they couldn't hide their astonishment at his beauty. The girls began to pester Cercia with questions about her father, with one even declaring she wanted to marry him, prompting Cercia to shout at them again to stay away from her. Finally, they arrived at the grand banquet hall. Cercia looked out of the carriage window in surprise. She hadn't expected the hunting competition to be so extravagant, with nobles everywhere. As the Duke of Grey's family arrived, the guests inside were whispering amongst themselves. One lady acted very excited, claiming she had been anxiously waiting for this day and had to go over and exchange a few words with them. Duke Jed Grey walked in with his grandson, Enoch, and reminded him that all the nobles were watching him, and he must prove his worth in this competition at all costs. He ordered him to prove to everyone that he was superior to the Emblem family. Enoch replied seriously and respectfully that he understood, addressing him as my lord. The Duke, in a gentler tone, reminded him to call him grandfather, which Enoch immediately did. His grandfather told him to go greet the other families. So Enoch wondered if Cercia had arrived yet. He thought that if the nation's hero had arrived, the hall would surely be noisier, and he confidently told himself that she couldn't possibly be stronger than him, and losing to her was impossible. He firmly believed his victory was an unchangeable fact. Meanwhile, in another room, the maid, Josiah, was telling a wearily seated Cercia that she would put the luggage aside. Cercia thanked her, and then Josiah remembered something. Josiah told her that her parents were having dinner with Count and Countess Condrias, and they had told her to have dinner alone and then go to bed, which shocked Cercia. Cercia, shocked, asked the maid what she meant. How could she not see her parents on a day like today of all days? But Josiah just told her to enjoy some quiet time alone. The maid then hurried away, leaving Cercia standing there alone. Cercia looked at the closed door. wondering if Josiah had really left, and was surprised that everyone, even her close maid, had left her alone on this special day. Shock enveloped her, and her eyes grew moist as she suddenly realized it was her 7th birthday, and this was not at all the right way to celebrate a birthday. She thought that she had completely forgotten her past life as a 32-year-old woman, suspecting it was because having dinner with her parents on her birthday had become a natural and matter-of-course thing for her. A sense of injustice swept over her, and she felt it was extremely cruel to leave her alone on such a day. True sadness took hold of her heart, and tears began to well up in her eyes as she wondered about the reason for this deep feeling, whether it was because she had had enough of the children's harassment in the carriage, or if her sadness was heartfelt. She decided she might feel better after a nap and resolved to have a good day in her own way, then lay down on the bed. Just as she was drifting off to sleep, the door opened quietly, and Josiah appeared at the doorway, saw her mistress was asleep, and sadly noticed she had been crying. The maid whispered to the sleeping Circia not to worry. Josiah blindfolded Circia, causing Circia to ask in confusion what was happening. The maid ordered her not to remove the blindfold and just follow her. Circia wondered about the reason for all this mystery, so Josiah told her she would understand everything when they arrived. Josiah blindfolded Circia, causing Circia to ask in confusion what was happening. The maid ordered her not to remove the blindfold and just follow her. Circia wondered about the reason for all this mystery, so Josiah told her she would understand everything when they arrived. Circia began to complain that she had many tasks today and was planning to change her clothes to check the banquet hall, but Josiah gently quieted her, and Circia compromised. As she walked blindfolded, she thought that she didn't want a gift, she just wanted to spend some time with her parents, and she wished to forget the hunting competition and rest well when Josiah told her they had arrived and she was going to take off the blindfold. As soon as the blindfold was removed, Circia found herself in the middle of a surprise celebration, surrounded by flying, colorful confetti. Her father stood before her, smiling and holding a large box, wishing her a happy birthday. She asked in surprise what was happening, so her father told her it was hard to keep the secret because they wanted to surprise her and encouraged her to open her gift. Tears welled up in her eyes, and in that moment, she realized she had known nothing about this surprise and felt relieved that her parents had never forgotten her birthday. She excitedly wondered what the surprise gift would be, and as she lifted the heavy lid of the box, her eyes widened in absolute shock as she looked at what was inside. The gift was a magnificent longsword, carefully placed on a red satin cushion, with a sentence engraved on the blade: "To Kurja Emblem, our pride, with all our love." She looked at her father, overwhelmed, and he smiled and asked if she liked the gift. Kurja remembered how in the past she always complained that Enoch used a real sword, while her father told her she still lacked enough strength and might get hurt. At that time, she had angrily protested that it was unfair and that she needed to defeat Enoch as soon as possible. Back in the present, she looked at the sword affectionately, realizing her father had remembered her insistence, and felt extremely happy because he had made it for her with his own hands. Then, her father presented her with another gift, the official uniform of the Emblem Knight Order, announcing that she was now an official knight of the Emblem Knight Order. Circia tried on the jacket and thanked her father enthusiastically, asserting that it was the best gift she had ever received. But her father told her it was too early to celebrate. Circia heard a familiar voice calling her from a distance, and turned to find her mother standing before her, surrounded by the Emblem Knights. Her mother stepped forward, also wearing the official knight uniform, told her to come closer, and then announced that to celebrate her official entry into the Knight Order, she would be her first opponent in a duel. Circia eagerly asked if this meant she finally acknowledged her as a knight, and her mother gave an affirmative answer with a confident smile. Her mother drew her sword, asserting to her daughter that she would not hold back in this duel. Circe's eyes grew moist, and she whispered that her mother was the best, then added with a sly smile that she herself had also trained a lot. Circia excitedly raised her new sword and shouted at her mother to get ready. Her mother smiled and accepted the challenge, telling her daughter to show her everything she had. Her mother rushed at her daughter with a swift strike, a blow so powerful that Circia was sent flying into the air. Her mother looked up at the sky in surprise, sarcastically commenting that her daughter could fly, while her father watched the scene in shock. Her mother laughed, admitting she might not have controlled her strength, and immediately ordered the knights to find Circia. Meanwhile, Cercia was lying somewhere in the forest, thinking she should have known to ask her mother to go easy on her. Later that day in the banquet hall, Cercia noticed her mother was extremely popular, with nobles surrounding her to offer greetings. Her father pointed to the scene and told her that one day, when she became the leader of the Emblem Knight Order, she would be in the same position as her mother, which made Cercia doubtful. She thought it was impossible to become like her mother and admitted that she had realized the cruel truth the moment she started learning swordsmanship. Because when she compared her progress with the news of Enoch's achievements, she felt she simply didn't have enough talent. This was why she had felt anxious and uneasy throughout the journey to the hunting competition, as she had a premonition that she was bound to lose to Enoch. She remembered that she had started learning swordsmanship with only one goal, which was to defeat that annoying boy, but she wondered if it was all still meaningful if it ended in failure. Then, a disturbing thought crossed her mind. If she lost to Enoch, would she give up sword practice completely? The thought left her feeling empty and disappointed for reasons she couldn't understand. Her thoughts were interrupted by girls shouting for Lord Grey, and she saw Enoch surrounded by female admirers. The girls vied for his attention, some offering him dessert, others wanting to dance with him, but he politely apologized to them, explaining that he was grateful for their invitations but had to stay by his grandfather's side that day and promised to give them a chance later. Cercia watched him from a distance, feeling indignant and wondering why he spoke with such an arrogant tone, like an adult. In her eyes, he was extremely annoying. At that moment, their eyes met across the hall, exchanging sharp, challenging glances. Cercia wondered why he was suddenly staring at her. Suddenly, the herald's voice rang out, announcing the arrival of His Majesty the Emperor and His Highness the Crown Prince, which surprised Cercia. The Emperor entered the hall accompanied by the young Crown Prince, and everyone bowed respectfully and cheered in welcome. Cercia's father held his daughter in his arms, and she was captivated by the Emperor's majestic appearance, while someone whispered that the Crown Prince shouldn't be in a place like this. Cercia asked him why the atmosphere was so strange, and if the Crown Prince wasn't supposed to be present. So her father explained that he had been very frail since childhood, telling her he had escaped death several times, which made everyone anxious for him. Cercia looked at the young prince and felt it was pitiful that he was so sick at such a young age that he couldn't even leave the palace. As Cercia watched the Crown Prince, the prince waved at her. She was surprised, wondering if he was really looking at her, and in her opinion, despite his frailty, he was a kind-hearted person. She asked her father if the archbishop could heal the Crown Prince with his divine power. Her father replied that even if the archbishop could heal his body, he couldn't get rid of those who put his life in constant danger. Curiosity filled her heart, and she asked about the meaning of his words, but her father told her she was still too young to understand these things, that it was the business of adults. Cercia understood but felt sad that the young prince faced such dangers at such a young age. She had already learned that a knight's greatest honor was to become someone's sword, and with her current skills, it seemed Enoch was closest to winning the honor of protecting the Crown Prince. But she was determined to work hard until the end and become the sword that could protect the prince. Meanwhile, the Emperor was exchanging greetings with those present, who were praising today's banquet. Duke Enoch Grey approached, and the Emperor told him he had heard rumors about his grandson. He asked if the claims about his exceptional talent were true, and the Duke replied with a smile that the Emperor was too kind and requested permission to formally introduce him. Enoch bowed before the Emperor and introduced himself, and the Emperor commented that he already looked like a promising talent and should get along well with the Crown Prince. Then the Crown Prince introduced Enoch as the future leader of the Grey family, and the prince welcomed him warmly. The Emperor announced he was going to enjoy the banquet, and asked Enoch to stay with the Crown Prince for a while, to which Duke Jed immediately agreed. The Emperor whispered to the Duke that it would be best for the Crown Prince to have a close friend by his side when he ascends the throne, especially if that friend is a knight of the Royal Guard Knight Order. The Duke understood the message, and the Emperor left the matter in his hands. Doubts arose in the Duke's mind, wondering if the Emperor was considering supporting the Grey family to take over the position of the Royal Guard Knight Order. But he found this public support suspicious, as the position of the Royal Guard Knight Order had always belonged to the Emblem family, even during the most intense competition between the two great families. But he realized the situation was different this time because of the large skill gap between Enoch and Cercia. The Duke felt that his genius grandson might finally be able to fulfill the long-held wish of the Grey family. At that moment, Benedict welcomed the Crown Prince, expressing his joy at seeing him after a long time. Lord Benedict had brought his daughter Cercia. Cercia stepped forward and bowed before the Crown Prince, proudly introducing herself as Cercia Emblem. The Crown Prince's face lit up upon seeing her, calling her name and expressing how happy he was to see her, telling her he had been waiting for her anxiously. The prince excitedly took out a book and asked if she knew how much he longed to talk about this book with someone of the same age from the Emblem family. He asked if she had read the book The Emperor's Sword, which told the story of the founding emperor and the first lord of the Emblem family, and explained that it was required reading for all children of Rotinus. Once he confirmed she had read it, the prince began to enthusiastically present his insights. Suddenly, the prince coughed violently, and blood trickled from his mouth, shocking Cercia. Everyone rushed to him in concern, but he assured them he was fine, just a little emotional from being too engrossed in the book. Enoch's grandfather suggested he go back and rest early, while Benedict proposed a call for a priest. The prince tried to downplay it, insisting he was fine and that this happened often, but added that he had to go back now. But he looked at Cercia with pleading eyes, expressing his wish to stay a little longer, and Cercia read from his eyes that he was begging her. Benedict suggested the Crown Prince rest for today and visit their territory another day, a suggestion that made the prince very happy. Cercia felt sympathy for him, as he was on the verge of death from his illness and couldn't even play freely outside. Out of sympathy, she told him that when he came to visit, she, as the heir of the Emblem family, would show him the sword of the founding lord mentioned in the book The Emperor's Sword. The Crown Prince was extremely impressed and felt immense happiness at this offer. Cercia bid the prince farewell, wishing him a good rest and a speedy recovery, and promised to look forward to seeing him again. So he smiled and waved goodbye to her. Then Lord Grey also expressed his well wishes to the Crown Prince, hoping he would enjoy the banquet. Duke Jed Grey looked at Cercia's father with approval, commenting on his skill in so easily inviting the Crown Prince to their territory. He then announced he would accompany His Highness to see the priest. The Duke told his grandson, Enoch, to follow him, but Enoch felt an inexplicable discomfort. Despite being clearly superior to Cercia, he had a vague feeling that he would be defeated by her. The next morning, at the entrance of the metro forest, the herald stood before the contestants. He loudly announced that this was a fierce battlefield for the young nobles and an opportunity for them to forge their path as knights of the Rotinus Empire. He then declared the start of the Metro Forest Hunting Competition, which had attracted the attention of many Knight Order commanders. Before the competition began, Cercia's mother was reminding her of the most important advice. She reminded her to never let the prey out of her sight, to observe until the very end, and then asked about her strength. Cercia asked in confusion about her own strength, so her mother replied that as long as she didn't lose sight of her goal, she would naturally know when the time came. Her father interrupted them, telling his wife it was time for Cercia to leave and try to soothe her, saying their daughter would be fine. He assured her that no magical beast would be released in the youth area, and Cercia would only face small herbivores. But her mother was still worried, so Cercia comforted her by saying she was strong and there was no need to worry. At that moment, the herald called for all knights of the youth group to assemble, so Cercia set off excitedly. Her mother shouted at her from a distance that it was better to lose than to get hurt, but she replied no and promised in her heart to remember her words. She mentally scolded herself because what she said was the exact opposite of what she thought. She believed this was her only chance to defeat Enoch, and she had to face him before he became stronger, or she would never have a chance to win. She was determined to hunt more prey than Enoch no matter what, and quickly rushed into the forest. When she arrived, she found that Enoch had already arrived first, with two other young men beside him. Cercia approached and introduced herself, and the two young men welcomed her in confusion. Cercia, surprised, wondered if the competition had already started and asked for Enoch's location. But she was shocked when she realized Enoch had already disappeared and had set off without a word. Anger filled her heart, and she shouted that she would never lose. Meanwhile, the two young men were whispering, one of them planning to withdraw and that they should wait for him to come back and then tell him their decision. They thought that Circia, like the rest of the nobles, didn't care about them, and this battle was destined to be a loss for them anyway. As they were talking, Circia approached them and asked what they were doing. Circia asked the two young men why they weren't hunting, warning them that they would lose if they continued like this. So they told her that Enoch and Circia's prey were scattered everywhere, and they were cleaning up. Circia was surprised and thanked them, pointing out that they would also lose if they continued this way, and offered to take over so they could go hunt. The two young men refused her offer, insisting they were fine and that their winning or losing would only cause trouble in the end, as no one cared about low-ranking nobles. Then one of them revealed that his father had ordered him to surrender if he was in a group with someone from the Emblem or Grey families, which shocked Circia and made her wonder why. The young man explained that if they won, they would be seen as traitors for ruining the expected showdown between Emblem and Grey. And if they lost, it was expected, so no matter how they tried, they couldn't change anything. Circia tightened her grip on her sword, realizing that the moment they were grouped together, their fate was already sealed. But she flew into a rage, shouting in their faces that they had it all wrong. The two young men looked at her in surprise, not understanding what she meant. Circia challenged them, saying that if they could defeat her here, she would show them what would actually happen. With a sly smile, she told them that this opportunity was like a lottery ticket and to listen carefully. The two young men confusedly wondered what the word lottery ticket meant. Circia told them that they thought winning would make them traitors, but that was not the case. She admitted that many nobles were there to see the conflict between her family and Enoch's family, because they were the biggest families in the country. She compared it to two large houses on fire and wondered how much pleasure people would feel watching the scene. She then posed a hypothetical question to them. If the house next to the first fire burst into an even brighter flame, would people really complain that they couldn't see the original fire clearly and curse them as traitors? Or would they enjoy the more exciting new fire scene? She then revealed the real prize to them. If one of them could defeat her or Enoch here, then both the Emblem Knight Order and the Grey Knight Order would compete to recruit them, because they had defeated the genius Circia and the prodigy Enoch. She asked them if they understood what she meant. Just as she was urging them to get up and go, Enoch suddenly appeared with his prey. Enoch sarcastically repeated her words, the genius Circia and the prodigy Enoch. Circia, flustered, asked when he had arrived. Enoch told her that his grandfather always said that birth, family, appearance, and eloquence, even winning or losing, were not important to a true knight, because a knight speaks only with their sword. He then asked if they had communicated with their swords today. The two young men replied that they hadn't said anything yet. One of them tried to justify his position, explaining that not everyone had a strong heart like them. The young man thought to himself that this was his way of survival. At that moment, Circia looked at the blond young man, thinking his face looked familiar, and remembered Olivia Bloodmore, so she asked if he was her brother. The young man was surprised and asked how she knew his sister. Circia remembered Olivia's annoying voice in the carriage and realized she would never forget that voice and those eyes. Circia dismissed the thought and told the young man that his sister said his eternal dream was to join the Emblem Knight Order. This surprised him. Circia offered to give the blond young man a hint to win the favor of her mother, the leader of the Emblem Knight Order. So he asked in confusion about the hint. With a brilliant smile, she told him that her mother liked rebels, those who would fight back to the end even if they were going to lose. The young man was shocked by this advice, then excitedly pointed to his friend Emmett, declaring they had no time to waste and were going to put on a fire show worthy of young nobles. Enoch drew his sword and told the two young men that since their starting points were different, he and Circia would give them a 30-minute grace period to hunt while they waited. Circia accused him of just wanting to use the time to rest because he was tired, so Enoch ordered her to be quiet. With their challenging spirits ignited, the two young men declared they would not refuse the offer and would show their skills. The two young men screamed excitedly and rushed into the forest, saying they would sweep through everything. Circia watched them run off, thinking they were quite cute, but Enoch called her name. He asked her if he had ever told her that if he won this competition, he could live with his mother. Circia was very happy to hear this news. Enoch commented that she looked even happier than he did. She told Enoch it was good news. Then Enoch asked if she would go easy on him so he could win. Circia's expression changed completely, and she asked how he dared to make such a request, asserting that she would crush him. Enoch laughed and said that was better, because that was her true personality and the reason he told her. He then suddenly noticed that she no longer felt nauseous when they were close, which surprised Circia, who realized he was right. She remembered that looking into Enoch's eyes used to make her nauseous, but now she found them beautiful, and even had a strange feeling that was both unfamiliar and familiar. As she moved closer to him to observe his eyes carefully, Enoch shouted at her, warning her she was too close, so she stepped back in confusion and apologized. Suddenly, a young girl appeared, screaming at them not to get married, which surprised them. It was Olivia, the blonde young man's sister. Olivia angrily questioned Circia, describing her as a liar because she had said she would marry her father instead of Enoch. Circia wondered how she had gotten in. Olivia continued to scream, reminding her that she had promised to marry her father. Circia held her head in frustration, wondering if this girl was a dolphin because her screams were so shrill. Circia angrily scolded her, asking how she had entered this dangerous place. Olivia, surprised by her anger, said she had heard the youth area was safe and had no magical beasts. Enoch explained to her that there were beasts in the forest, and it was very dangerous to enter without a sword, so only contestants were allowed in. He added that the competition was held under the Emperor's patronage, and she had to explain how she got in, or her family, the Bloodmores, would be held responsible. At the mention of her parents, Tara grabbed Olivia, and Olivia confessed she came because her brother was in the same group as Enoch and she wanted to see him. She begged them not to tell her parents, so Enoch told her that her brother would be there soon, and they had no choice but to take her out. Circia explained to Enoch that the consequences would be severe. They might just get a scolding, but if another noble caused a scandal in a competition of this scale, their future would be ruined. Olivia cried, saying her brother had been working so hard, which made Circia angrily wonder whose fault all of this really was. Circia began to think of a solution to this dilemma. She had to find a way to ensure Olivia left the forest safely while preserving the honor of Sir Osric, who had just taken his first step as a knight. Circia was lost in thought, trying to find a solution to the problem while also preserving her chance of winning the duel against Enoch. Meanwhile, in the Emperor's tent, a guard was receiving a direct order from His Majesty. The Crown Prince noticed a mysterious smile on his father's face and asked for the reason. The Emperor replied that he was looking forward to seeing who would win the competition and asked for the Crown Prince's prediction. The Crown Prince explained that he had always supported the Emblem family, but he thought Grey might win this time. The Crown Prince justified his opinion by saying that, as he had read in the book The Emperor's Sword, the Emblem family was characterized by their strength, but when it came to protecting the weak, they didn't care about winning or losing. He then revealed to his father that he had seen a little girl follow Circia into the forest. He concluded that if Circia was forced to protect the girl, she would likely lose the competition against Grey. This news piqued the Emperor's interest, as he thought the appearance of the little girl could make the story more interesting. Back in the forest, Circia was still frustrated, trying to figure out how to resolve the current situation and defeat Enoch at the same time. Because all her efforts were about to be wasted, she briefly considered letting Osric leave with his sister, regardless of what would happen to him. But she then dismissed this selfish thought, realizing that Olivia was, after all, the one who had made the mistake. After much thought, she sighed and compromised, deciding to withdraw from the competition as it was the only viable solution for her. Enoch was shocked by her sudden decision. Circia explained to him that if she personally took Olivia back, Osric would not be in trouble. Olivia looked at her gratefully. Circia told Olivia she would take her to the exit, and Olivia wondered if she could really do that after preparing so much for the competition. Circia admitted it was a pity, but she didn't want to exchange victory for ignoring someone in trouble. She added that the Emblem family's motto was to protect the weak, and if she left them here to win, she might be kicked out of her house, which left Enoch in absolute awe. Circia asked Olivia to promise not to throw any more tantrums at Enoch, and Olivia apologized and promised her. But Enoch anxiously interrupted her, asking what his fate would be if she withdrew. Circia reminded him that he had to finish the competition, but Enoch offered to help. Circia explained to him that all eyes were on them in this competition, and if they were caught moving together, there would be no excuse. She then looked at him seriously and reminded him that he had a reason to win, which Enoch acknowledged. Everything he did was for his mother, for whom he had been waiting for so long. Circia placed her hand on Olivia's shoulder and ordered Enoch to go and win, warning him that it would be a great shame if he couldn't do it now. Enoch looked at them, thinking that Cercia must have had her own reasons for wanting to win. Cercia reassured Olivia that she would get her home safely. As they were walking, Cercia noticed Olivia suddenly trembling and asked her why. Olivia pointed with a trembling hand into the darkness before them. A huge creature with sharp fangs, forked antlers, and glowing red eyes emerged from the bushes. Fear gripped Cercia as she realized it was a magical beast, a giant horned boar. She wondered in shock why a low-level magical beast was here after being told that all of them had been cleared from the youth area. Cercia told Olivia to hide behind her and not move, remembering what she had learned from her mother about the magical beasts of this world. She knew that these beasts usually resided in Crichton, but sometimes came to human settlements due to an uncontrollable desire to kill. Just then, Enoch suddenly appeared and told Cercia it was a low-level magical beast, to which she replied that she knew, but she was terrified. No matter how skilled Enoch was, facing such a beast was beyond their capabilities. In fact, for Cercia, it was impossible. Cercia realized that if she didn't stop the beast here, not only would Olivia be in danger, but so would Emmett and Osric when they returned. She resolved to fight, gripping her sword tightly and remembering the words engraved on it. To Cercia Emblem, our pride, with all our love. She thought of her father and realized she was the daughter who made him proud. As a member of the Emblem family, she had to be a proud knight who protected the weak. She prepared to fight and recalled the most important advice her mother had given her. That advice was to never take her eyes off the prey and to watch it until the very end. Then she remembered her mother's question about her strength and realized the answer lay in the moves she had practiced hundreds of times. It was a move her body would remember even if her mind wandered. She shouted and charged at the beast, delivering a powerful blow that created a deep wound. The beast screamed in pain, and Cercia called out to Enoch. She yelled at him to finish it now. Enoch quickly rushed towards the beast. He delivered the final blow, causing the beast to explode. Enoch gasped for breath, wondering if they had successfully eliminated it. Cercia collapsed to her knees, exhausted and covered in blood. Enoch looked at her with concern and blamed himself for freezing like a fool just now. It was the worst moment of his life. As Enoch was wallowing in guilt, Cercia yelled at him to completely cut off the beast's breath as it was still alive. At her shout, Enoch's stiff legs moved involuntarily. He charged at the beast again, realizing that she was the one who had awakened him from his paralysis and guided him to the monster's weak spot. He looked at his blood-soaked sword and admitted to himself that he had completely lost to her. Olivia wondered in fear if it was all over. Olivia rushed to Cercia, calling her name, and Cercia reassured her that she was alive. Olivia thanked her with tears in her eyes for saving her life, saying she was alive thanks to her. Cercia smiled and said she was glad she was safe. Suddenly, Cercia heard a rustling sound and warily asked who was there, and a familiar voice answered her. It was Osric and Emmett, returning from their hunt. Osric was surprised to see his sister Olivia there, wondering why she was there and what all the blood was about. The two young men were stunned to see the corpse of the magical beast lying on the ground, and one of them wondered if it was Enoch who had killed it. Enoch tried to give the credit to Cercia, but Cercia called out to Osric and told him that chaos was about to begin. Since Enoch had caught the beast, she told him to quickly leave with Olivia while everyone was busy, without letting anyone notice them, which left Osric completely confused. She told him she would explain everything later and that they had to hurry. So Osric agreed and left with his sister. Just then, Emmett appeared and told her he would go with them to help them leave safely. So Cercia asked him to take care of them. Cercia sighed, thinking what an eventful day it had been. Then Enoch called her name. She checked on him, but he sternly asked her why she was lying. But she didn't understand what he meant. Enoch accused Cercia of pretending to be stupid. She pointed at him and retorted loudly, insisting she was sure of what she had seen. She covered her mouth in shock, wondering in horror why the face of that bastard from her past life was overlapping with Enoch's. She remembered the man, the right-hand man of the murderer who killed her parents, who had also killed her. He was in charge of managing her enemies' funds and planning their political strategy. She remembered remembered the last time she saw him. He had mocked her for being late again, and asked if she had come specifically to see him. It was her nemesis, Yoon. Back in reality, Sersia felt nauseous and demanded that Enoch not come near her. She wondered in confusion what had just happened and why that man's face had overlapped with Enoch's. Enoch asked if she was okay and blamed what happened on the magical beast's blood. She took a step back, thinking that maybe it was because of the similar hair color, and the nausea stopped. She told herself it was strange that Enoch and that man were completely different because Yoon was a scoundrel, and as for Enoch, he was a bit rude, but not a bad person. Enoch told her that everything was fine now. Enoch grabbed his sword and told her he was the one who should have done it, so she asked him what he meant. Enoch challenged Sersia to a real duel. Sersia was shocked by his request, wondering why he wanted a duel now. He explained to her that she was the one who killed the magical beast, but she lied to Osric and said he did it, so he wanted to settle things between them with their swords to see who was truly stronger. Sersia was surprised by his words and assured him that he was the one who finished off the beast, and that this was just her nature as Sersia Emblem. Enoch replied that he found no pleasure in a victory given to him as a concession. Sersia flew into a rage, sarcastically asking who was conceding to whom, and asked if he thought she called him over because she didn't want to finish off the beast herself, insisting she wanted to kill it with her own hands too. Sersia continued talking to Enoch, explaining that she called him over because she had lost her sword, calling him a fool. She told Enoch that it meant he was the one who killed the beast, and if he hadn't, she would have died. It was then that Enoch noticed her palm was completely split open, but Sersia angrily warned him not to think he had achieved a one-sided victory. She pointed to the pile of game she had caught, insisting that it didn't mean she had lost completely. She assured him that there would be many opportunities to crush him in the future. Enoch understood from her words that she intended to continue learning swordsmanship. Sersia admitted that she didn't like him at all, from head to toe, but she was grateful to him because he had taught her swordsmanship. Sersia remembered the moment she saw the fear in Olivia's eyes and how it triggered memories of why she became a detective in her past life. She recalled the victim's parents thanking her with tears in their eyes, insisting their daughter would rest in peace. Thanks to her, of course, her main motivation was to catch her parents' killer, but the idea of being useful to someone, of being someone's salvation, filled her with immense joy because she had succeeded in protecting someone with her own hands. That instinctive feeling of plunging her sword into the beast's weak spot was exhilarating, and she would never forget it. In that moment, she realized she wanted to learn more about swordsmanship and that she truly loved the sword. Enoch noticed her happiness and commented that she seemed genuinely happy when learning swordsmanship. Just then, Enoch returned to the festival grounds, where everyone welcomed him with cheers and applause. News spread quickly that he had eliminated a magical beast at such a young age, and that the Grey family had finally produced a genius who surpassed the Emblems. People gathered around Duke Jed Grey to congratulate him, and he proudly declared that this child was the beginning of the history the Grey family would write from now on. This history would become a legend, and his grandson would be the first member of the Grey family to serve the crown prince. The emperor watched this scene from his throne with a smile, while the duke bowed respectfully to him. The emperor sarcastically commented that Duke Jed Grey was truly fearsome, and that he had noticed the chess game the duke had prepared for him. Then he wondered with a cunning smile if things were proceeding just as he wished. Because with Enoch winning the hunting competition, the Duke now had a reason to make a Grey the next Imperial Guard. The Emperor wondered if the Duke would have to respond to the steps he wanted to take. He ended his speech with a malicious question, wondering if his master would do this for him. Elsewhere, Sersia's mother and father were anxiously awaiting her return. A lady called out to Sersia's mother, Lady Emblem. It was the Marchioness Bloodmore and her daughter Olivia, who had come to tell her something. The Marchioness bowed before Lady Melchia, begging for her forgiveness and apologizing repeatedly, which surprised Melchia, who asked her to raise her head. The Marchioness Bloodmore told Lady Melchia that her daughter Olivia had explained everything, saying she had secretly followed Sersia into the forest. She then revealed that Sersia had saved her daughter from a magical beast, which surprised Melchia. Olivia interrupted her mother to assure Lady Melchia that Sersia had only suffered a minor injury to her palm. but that she was fine. Olivia admitted she was sorry for her reckless behavior, which only caused trouble for others, and that everything that happened was her fault. Lady Melchia smiled and told her that as an Emblem Knight, it was a great honor to protect Miss Bloodmore. This noble response left a deep impression on Olivia and her mother. Melchia sat before Olivia and asked her not to blame herself, because everything an Emblem does is right. She then called her husband and told him they were leaving now. The Marchioness commented to her daughter that Lady Melchia was truly a remarkable person, and Olivia agreed, saying she was very remarkable. Cercia's father pointed to a spot in the forest. Melchia saw her daughter emerging from the woods. The parents anxiously called out to their daughter. Cercia shouted that she was back and ran to them, embracing them with a heart full of happiness. Her father welcomed her back and asked if she had fun, to which she replied enthusiastically. Cercia told her mother she had something important to tell her. She announced with great happiness that she felt she had fallen in love with the sword, which surprised her parents. She broke into a brilliant smile. Her parents lovingly embraced her, telling her that was enough, as that was what mattered most. Elsewhere, Enoch was training hard, his instructor warning him that if he was late by even a second, his head would be chopped off. The instructor reminded him that in a real battle, there is no time to think, and swordsmanship must be learned with the body, not the brain. Enoch realized this, but he still struggled to apply it. He continued to train hard until he was able to break his instructor's sword. His instructor praised him, declaring him worthy of the title of the youngest winner of the hunting competition, and told him that today's training was over. Enoch overheard someone commenting that his skills were excellent and he was qualified to win the competition, and another saying the time had finally come for the Grey family to crush the Emblem family. But Enoch remembered that despite his victory in the hunting competition, there was a greater truth between him and Cercia. In the moment they faced the magical beast, Cercia acted while he froze, and he felt he didn't deserve this praise. He sat alone under a tree. He took out a letter from his mother, in which she expressed her regret at being in Crichton and unable to see his performance. But she told him that the head of the family had promised to let her return to the palace if there was good news from the hunting competition, and she believed he could definitely do it with his current skills, and she would return then. Enoch's mother ended the letter by expressing how much she missed him, so Enoch folded the letter and told himself that this was enough, and that he would be able to see his mother soon. But fate had other plans, and Enoch Grey disappeared under mysterious circumstances. In the Grey family estate, Enoch was training hard. The Emperor watched him from a distance, commenting that his performance was as impressive as ever, especially his ability to kill a magical beast at such a young age. The Emperor asked Duke Jed Grey if he agreed. The Duke replied that he was referring to the magical beast the Emperor had released himself, that this had crossed a line, and wondered which family would send their children to the hunting competition after this. He added that he had heard the Bloodmore family allowed their daughter into the forest, and asked the Emperor if this was also one of his intentions. The Emperor denied it, claiming his innocence. The Duke realized the Emperor knew everything and directly asked him what he was planning. He accused the Emperor of gambling with children's lives as if it were a joke in a competition held by the royal family. The Emperor explained that without the presence of the magical beast, there was no other way to know the true abilities of these future leaders, and insisted that his knights were there and it wasn't dangerous. He added that Enoch had shown the strongest skills as he had wished, and asked the Duke if this wasn't what he wanted as well, because the Emperor had already laid the groundwork for choosing Enoch as the next Emperor's sword. The Emperor expressed his sincere hope that this time, the Grey family would produce a royal guard capable of protecting the Crown Prince. The Duke thought that if that were the case, they could finally win their long-standing struggle against the Emblem family, a victory he and his ancestors had long desired. But he wondered in confusion why the Emperor would give him what he wanted so easily. The Emperor explained that, as the Duke knew, he was looking for a new knight, a brilliant young knight with a sharp mind who could protect people from the magical beasts of Crichton, a knight like Enoch Grey, and wondered if he could become the hero of this era. The Duke acknowledged that Enoch was undoubtedly an outstanding knight, but added that it was illogical to grant him the title of Emperor's Sword just because he was a genius, and asked what the Emperor truly wanted. The Duke knew the royal family would never favor the Grey family without a reason. The Duke sighed and asked the Emperor if he could speak with him frankly, as they used to. even for just a moment. The Emperor agreed, saying it had been a long time since then. The Duke reminded the Emperor his name was Martian, pointing out that a long time had passed since Dana was sent to Crichton by Imperial order, and he directly asked him if something had happened to her. The Emperor admired the master's sharpness and told him it would be helpful for their conversation. The Duke realized the Emperor's proposal to have Enoch join the Royal Guard meant he wanted the Duke to remain silent about the disappearance of the leader of the Grey Knights. The Emperor confirmed his deduction and suggested that the matter of Dana's disappearance be closed just like that. He told him he had no choice but to accept, as this was politics. The Duke flew into a rage, asking the Emperor if he was the one who taught him to act this way, calling him a coward. He accused the Emperor of hiding for fear of being blamed, which confused the Emperor. Duke Jed Grey sighed and said that the Emperor must have spent his nights in agony, thinking about what kind of compensation to offer so that the Duke who lost his daughter couldn't say a word. The Emperor panicked, claiming he was just conveying the royal family's position, but the Duke demanded he admit the truth directly, reminding him that the previous Emperor knew this simple truth that he was ignoring. He reminded him that when a person makes a mistake, they must apologize first, and only after that can they consider showing courtesy to the Grey family, adding that since the Emperor had learned swordsmanship, he must practice politics as someone who once wielded a sword. Because a person who wields a sword must never evade an obstacle, or their head will fall in the blink of an eye. The Duke explained that he was scolding him because he didn't want him to become an enemy of the Grey family, and declared his presumptuous lesson over. The Duke bowed and left the hall. After he left, the Emperor admitted to himself that he had tried to play a little trick on his teacher. The Emperor called out to the Duke, asking him to help him if he still considered him a dear student. The Emperor revealed to his teacher that the Queen was targeting the Crown Prince's life, that this was not just a suspicion but a fact known to all nobles, and that she was not satisfied with poisoning him, but had also sent assassins and performed ritual curses. He admitted that he wanted Enoch to be the prince's royal guard, that he didn't care if he was from Grey or Emblem. All he needed was a knight who could sacrifice his life for the weak prince. The Duke looked at the Emperor and told him he finally saw the face of the Martian he once knew, the one who fought for the weak heir. The Emperor explained that news of Dana's disappearance would spread throughout Leonidas in an instant, and with the shield against Crichton missing, refugees would appear. In this chaos, the Queen would make her move, and soon a bloody battle for the throne would break out. The Emperor told him that Enoch was also from the Queen's family, so if she succeeded in seizing power, he would be cast aside for his alliance with the Greys, and if she failed, he would be executed. The Emperor begged his teacher to stop the Queen. The Duke said he had anticipated this, knowing that Enoch's father was the Queen's own brother. The Duke wondered what crime the child had committed to be separated from his mother at such a young age, and he wondered why he had to be sacrificed to such a cruel fate. In the Emblem Palace, Benedict wondered why Circia wasn't ready yet, and the butler told him he had delivered the message, but she said she would not attend the awards ceremony, which surprised Benedict. Benedict suggested that the Duke talk to her directly, as that would be the best solution. Circia's father knocked on her door, anxiously asking if something was wrong, but he was surprised to find other girls in the room offering him dessert. Circia called out to him, and Olivia told her she had brought the maids over. Circia told him she had also brought some delicious desserts and offered him some. Her father politely declined and asked her if this behavior wasn't a bit impolite for a marquis's daughter, to which Olivia replied that she was doing it voluntarily. Olivia explained to Benedict that she wanted to help her because Circia was injured while saving her. Circia understood and asked for some private space, as he wanted to discuss something. So Circia asked Olivia to let them talk in private, and Olivia immediately agreed. Her father commented that this reminded him of her mother when she was young. He explained that he meant she would also start to gain many followers, as her mother had also started with 1 or 2 followers at first, and now many nobles followed her. He told her that protecting others with a sword was a privilege of those who wield it, and praised her nobility, for which Circia shyly thanked him. He then reminded her that the medal from the hunting competition was one of those privileges and asked why she didn't want to attend the ceremony. She told him that Enoch was the one who killed the magical beast, but he said it was her excellent thrust that did the job. Her father realized she had another wish and asked about it. Circia replied that she did have a request. She explained to him that she didn't care if Enoch got the medal. All she cared about was her injured hand. She told him that the cast on her hand prevented her from practicing with her sword, and she was extremely bored. She begged him to allow her to train again, claiming she had fully recovered. Her father politely refused her request, explaining that it was the doctor's decision and that the head of the family, her grandfather, had strictly forbidden training. But she insisted that she wouldn't overdo it, that she was worried she would forget everything if this continued, and that Enoch was surely still training. Her father. He hugged her, and she apologized for her stubbornness, explaining that she had been in a bad mood. Her father thought to himself that he had been worried she was maturing too quickly, but this childish behavior reassured him. He realized that she genuinely loved swordsmanship, and the blood of the Emblem family was undeniable. But Benedict told her that it wasn't entirely impossible, so she asked him what he meant. He replied with a cunning smile, reminding her that he was the strategist of the Emblem family and telling her she knew that very well, which was why she had made that request to him. At the medal ceremony, a nobleman approached to congratulate Circia on her medal. Circia was surprised to see Sir Osric and asked if he had joined the Emblem Knights, to which he thanked her, saying it was all thanks to her. He asked about her arm, knowing that training had already begun, so she told him the wound hadn't healed yet. She explained to him that she had only started training her lower body. She enthusiastically told him that her father had said if her upper body was injured, she must train her lower body, and if her right arm was injured, she must train her left. Osric was shocked by this logic, wondering if she really needed to go that far. Osric commented that he had also sensed her love for the sword during the hunting competition, and that her eyes truly sparkled when she talked about it. He thought to himself that if she weren't engaged to Sir Enoch, he would have definitely asked her out on a date. His thoughts were interrupted by Enoch's appearance, who asked him if he had rested well. Osric, feeling a bit flustered, told him he was just on his way to eat, so Enoch told him to enjoy his meal. Circia noticed that Enoch seemed tense and wondered if he was tired. Enoch asked her if she remembered they were engaged, and she gave an affirmative answer. She was wondering why he was asking that when he replied no, explaining that his sensitivity was due to the large crowd in the hall and that he just wanted to go home and rest, regardless of the medal. Circia reminded him that he was the guest of honor and asked where he was going, to which he replied that he didn't need any of this. He was just tired. The surrounding knights thought his reaction was reasonable, as it was natural for him to be in a bad mood since he hadn't killed the monster with his own hands. However, a Grey Knight commented that if it weren't for Enoch, a member of Emblem would be a corpse by now. A Grey Knight flew into a rage, accusing the Emblem Knight of being ungrateful, saying he only knew how to swing a sword but not how to think. The Emblem Knight retorted sarcastically, asking if he was done talking and reminding him that his family would always be second place. The Grey Knight erupted in fury, asking who he was calling second place, while the other challenged him to settle the matter immediately. The Grey Knight accepted the challenge, declaring they would see which family was truly the strongest. Enoch shouted at Circia, telling her to go get an adult. At that moment, memories of her past life flooded back into Circia's mind, and she remembered her enemy's words, asking if she missed him. It was Yun, who called her detective. Enoch's voice broke through her memories, repeatedly calling her name. Enoch looked at her bandaged hand. The Emblem Knights shouted at the Grey Knights, telling them to take that madman away. The Grey Knights replied that today was the day to teach the Emblem scum a lesson. The knights from both sides gathered, preparing for showdown to decide who was truly the strongest. Suddenly, a nobleman staggered and fell to the ground. An Emblem Knight wondered who had pushed him. The young man claimed he had tried to pass between them and tripped. The Emblem Knights recognized him as Lord Edward. Lord Edward appeared with a smile, greeting the members of the Emblem and Grey families. Circia called out to him in surprise as uncle, while Enoch was shocked to see his father. Enoch looked at him in confusion, whispering the word father. Edward sighed, expressing how long he had been looking for them, and commented on the delicious bread prepared by the Marchioness of Bladmore. He then politely asked if he could have some tea with the children. The knights immediately agreed and wished him a pleasant time. Edward thanked them and asked Circia to follow him. As he led her away, she wondered to herself if beauty was more powerful than the sword. After asking them to leave, Lord Edward opened a door to a side room and, with a calm smile, told the two children to rest inside and come out when they were ready. Circia naively asked about dessert and if her uncle would join them, but Enoch, realizing the situation, calmly explained to her that his father just wanted to get them away from the fight. Circia understood and enthusiastically thanked Edward for his concern, which surprised him, and she even wished him a good rest as well. Cercia affectionately called Edward uncle, while Enoch, before leaving them alone, simply addressed his father coldly. Upon entering the room, Cercia was relieved that they were safe, but she wondered aloud why the knights had suddenly started fighting. Cercia drew Enoch's attention to a distant sofa where some people were lying. Enoch ignored her words and looked at her seriously, wondering about her strange behavior in the hall earlier. Cercia pretended not to understand, but Enoch insisted that she knew exactly what he meant. He reminded her that she had clearly avoided him when he suggested getting an adult to stop the fight and asked if he had done something to upset her. He then wondered if she was still angry about him getting the credit in the hunting competition, but Cercia denied it. She assured him that it didn't matter to her at all, which prompted Enoch to ask for the real reason for her behavior then. Cercia hesitated for a moment before telling him there was something she wanted to ask him for help with. Enoch was surprised by the word request. Cercia explained that it was something that had been bothering her, and although it wasn't a big deal, she wouldn't tell him unless he promised to do it first. Enoch immediately objected, saying he needed to know what the request was before agreeing, but she held her ground. Enoch flew into a rage, thinking it wasn't a request, but a command, so Cercia stammered that he should just forget it if he didn't want to do it. After some thought, Enoch compromised and agreed to her request, telling her to just tell him. Cercia's face lit up with joy, and she asked him to repeat what she was about to say. Enoch was surprised and asked in confusion what he was supposed to repeat. Cercia approached him, looked at him seriously, and asked him to call her detective. Enoch was shocked by this strange request and remained silent for a long time. Cercia lost her patience and yelled at him to say the name immediately. Enoch pondered the meaning of this request in confusion. Cercia angrily urged him to hurry up. At that moment, Cercia was thinking to herself about the strange, lingering sense of familiarity she felt whenever she saw Enoch's face, and that perhaps if he called her by that name, she could find an explanation. For she hoped to find a connection between him and her past life's nemesis, Yoon Do-yoon. Enoch reluctantly uttered the word detective and then asked if she was satisfied now. He then asked her seriously, "Are you really Cercia?" Cercia tried to hide her inner turmoil and hesitantly replied that she felt nothing. She reassured herself that Enoch, despite his arrogance, couldn't possibly have any connection to that man. When Enoch guessed that someone else must have called her that before, Cercia became flustered and quickly denied it, insisting it wasn't a title and telling him to ignore the whole thing. Enoch condemned Cercia's strange request, wondering how he was supposed to ignore something like that, appearing very confused. But he quickly fell silent, his expression turning serious, which Cercia noticed, wondering why he hadn't finished his sentence, as it wasn't like him. Enoch completely ignored the matter and told her that since he had granted her request, it was now her turn to promise him something. Cercia was confused. He demanded in a firm tone that she not do that again, explaining seriously that she shouldn't look at him and see someone else in his features. He persistently repeated his demand, asking her to promise not to think of anyone else when looking at him. Cercia was surprised by his strong emotions, but immediately agreed, wondering to herself why he would bring up such a thing at that moment. Just then, a commotion was heard from outside the room, and Cercia wondered what was happening, but Enoch called her name to get her attention. Enoch insisted that she give him her promise before they left the room. Cercia found his behavior strange, thinking to herself how such a small person could evoke such complex emotions. She responded to his request, and they made a pinky promise. After it was done, Cercia, confused, suggested they go out and see the source of the noise, and Enoch was silent for a moment. Enoch calmly agreed to her suggestion. As they walked towards the door, Cercia noticed that despite his odd behavior, his expression had completely relaxed, which relieved her. When they opened the door, they found two adults talking about an important guest who was about to enter. Cercia wondered about the newcomer's identity, realizing it must be a figure one could only see on special occasions like this. One could meet. A stately woman walked in, and someone immediately announced that she was Her Majesty, the Empress. She was Empress Isabel Leopold Rutinus, and beside her was the second prince, Adore. Leopold Rutinus. Cercia commented on the Empress's beauty and asked Enoch if she was his father's sister, which Enoch confirmed, adding that his father didn't talk about her much. Cercia watched the Empress converse with the nobles and noticed the striking resemblance between her and her uncle, Edward, marveling at the strong genes of that family. Suddenly, Lord Edward appeared and called out to his son, Enoch. Sertia greeted him warmly, calling him uncle. With clear anxiety on his face, Edward told Sertia that he was forced to leave with Enoch due to an urgent matter. The two children immediately agreed, but Sertia noticed the paleness of her uncle's face and anxiously asked if he was all right. Edward tried to feign composure, claiming he was fine and just sweating a little. Sertia didn't believe his answer, as she noticed he was trembling and drenched in sweat. She deduced from his state that he seemed to be afraid and wary of something bad happening. Edward bid Sertia farewell, telling her to have fun and be safe before leaving with Enoch. Just as Sertia was about to go find her father, the Empress stopped Lord Edward, calling him by his name. The Empress asked if he really intended to leave without greeting the sister he hadn't seen in so long. The Empress looked at him with a reproachful expression, conveying her pain at his behavior and wondering if he truly didn't understand. A sister's heart. She wondered in a firm tone if they were to continue treating each other this way, despite being family. The Empress's words made Edward stop in his tracks, and he appeared very nervous as he bowed in greeting, wishing Her Majesty the Empress well. The Empress smiled and welcomed him, expressing her joy at seeing him and her even greater joy at meeting her nephew, Enoch, for the first time. But Edward interrupted her in a firm tone, coldly explaining that he had severed ties with the family, so the child was not her nephew, and he was no longer her brother. Enoch looked at his father, shocked and surprised, as Edward continued to formally request that the Empress withdraw her attention from his son. The Empress's expression changed, and Edward claimed he felt unwell and would take his leave. Sertia noticed the atmosphere in the hall had become filled with tension, and as she observed the situation, the Empress approached Edward, asking about his condition with false concern, insisting that as his sister, she wanted to check on him. Edward flew into a rage and shouted in her face, telling her to stop calling herself his sister. He continued shouting sharply, explaining that her constant talk of being family made him extremely uncomfortable and pleaded with her to stop. The Empress replied with feigned sadness that the fact they were family wouldn't change even if he hated it, and asked if he was still angry with her, which sparked whispers among those present, who wondered at the reason for his exaggerated reaction. Sertia watched the scene in shock, as she had never seen her uncle Edward so furious. As the Empress tried to calm him down, inviting him to talk and resolve their dispute as siblings, the noble's whispers continued, discussing Edward's disrespectful behavior towards his sister, the Empress, which added to Sertia's confusion. Exhaustion and pain were evident in Edward as he held his head and begged her to allow him to withdraw, as he felt extremely unwell. Sertia felt suspicious, thinking to herself that the Empress's insistence on calling him her brother, despite his clear rejection, was both strange and suspicious. She continued to analyze the situation, wondering why she wouldn't just let him leave if he was truly ill, especially after she approached him and asked where it hurt, which confirmed to Sertia that the Empress's personality was completely different from her gentle appearance. Sertia realized she was on her uncle's side and began to think of a way to help him, concluding that due to strict royal etiquette, he couldn't leave without her permission. She was determined to find a way to get him out of this predicament. In an instant, an idea flashed through her mind, and she decided the best course of action was to create a commotion to divert attention and provide an exit for her uncle. She rushed towards Edward, shouting with feigned concern, drawing everyone's attention to his cold sweat and exhausted state, and reminding him that he was already running a fever and his face had turned completely pale. She then turned to Enoch and winked at him, asking for his help in taking away his father, who needed immediate rest. Enoch immediately understood the plan and grabbed his father, urging him to hurry back to the palace, expressing his fear that he might faint again as he had in the past. The nobles began to talk amongst themselves, confirming that Sir Edward did indeed look unwell and that he must leave to rest. Sertia shouted again, asserting that it was impossible for the Empress not to have noticed her uncle's suffering and that if the situation continued, he would inevitably collapse. She added that if her uncle were to collapse here, it would constitute a major scandal for the royal family. Faced with this pressure, the Empress had no choice but to let Edward leave. The Empress added with a sinister smile that if she had known he was ill, she wouldn't have kept him there, and that everything she had said was out of concern for him. Sertia's suspicions were confirmed, because if the Empress had truly been concerned, she would have allowed him to leave from the beginning. Edward gave the Empress one last look before formally taking his leave and departing with his son, Enoch. After they left, Circe found herself standing alone before the Empress, regretting that she hadn't left with them. The Empress smiled calmly, but Circe felt her heart race, realizing that anyone could see the suppressed anger behind that smile. Circe had tried to comfort herself, justifying her actions by telling herself she hadn't said anything wrong, as her uncle was genuinely suffering, and the Empress, as a sister, should have been more understanding of his situation. She swallowed nervously, convincing herself she wasn't afraid and that she had simply done the right thing. Circe approached the Empress, apologized for her belated greeting, and then introduced herself as Circe of the Emblem family. The Empress replied with a smile that so she was the young lady of the Emblem family. The Empress commented that she seemed very interested in Edward and expressed her delight at seeing someone else care for him as she did. Circe replied with a naive laugh, asserting that she genuinely cared for her uncle and explaining that true concern meant feeling another's pain and their desire not to speak. Upon hearing these words, the Empress's expression completely changed, and she became extremely furious at the child's insolence. But Circe faced her with a defiant gaze, conveying an implicit message to the effect that she didn't care about her status as Empress. She only cared about making her stop harassing her uncle. She then added with childish sarcasm that she was sure someone like her wouldn't really get angry with a 7-year-old child. The Empress regained her composure and commented with a smile that the young lady of the Emblem family was very charming, and that such behavior was exactly what she expected from a member of the Emblem family. She then called for her son, Adore, to leave, adding that it was a shame they couldn't see Enoch and Edward, but she was sure there would be other opportunities in the future. Circe bowed to see them off, while the Empress immediately left with her son. After they were gone, Circe pondered the deeper meaning behind the Empress's last words. While she was distracted, her instructor approached her and asked where she had been, so she asked him for some water. She told him she had been speaking with Her Majesty the Empress, and then directly asked him if the Empress hated the Emblem family. He gave an affirmative answer and revealed to her, much to Circe's surprise, that the man the Empress had once loved had proposed to her mother, Lady Melcia, in the past. Circe was even more shocked to learn that this man was none other than His Majesty, the Emperor himself. The instructor explained with a laugh that the Emperor ended up marrying the Empress, so things turned out well, but Circe realized in that moment the reason for the Empress's deep-seated hatred for her family. Circe felt anxious, wondering if her actions had provoked the Empress, but she tried to calm herself down, thinking that she was still just a child and it was unlikely anything bad would happen later. Late that night, her mother was anxiously searching for her in the palace. Her mother suddenly burst into her room, calling her name, waking Circe from her sleep. Circe woke up and confusedly asked her mother what was wrong, so her mother confronted her angrily, asking what on earth she had said to Her Majesty the Empress. Circe replied that she hadn't said anything strange, but her mother scolded her harshly, asserting that she shouldn't have spoken to her at all. Circe had defended herself, saying she didn't know anything, but her mother cut her off, angrily asking why she had done it. In the midst of this argument, her father entered the room, calling for his wife. He tried to calm his anxious wife, reminding her that they had never told Circe about the Empress, while the mother commented that what had happened was her worst encounter with her. The father embraced his wife, who seemed deeply affected, especially considering what had recently happened to Dana, and tried to comfort her. Circe watched her parents anxiously, sensing that her mother was in great distress, and wondered if something bad had happened to Aunt Dana. Her mother asked to be alone for a while, and her husband immediately agreed. After her mother left, her father sat by her bed. Circe asked him directly if something had happened to Aunt Dana. Her father told her that he didn't know the details either, and that he and her mother were waiting for her grandfather to arrive and explain everything to them. He added that her mother must have been shocked to hear about her conflict with the Empress, so Circe felt guilty, wondering if she had made a grave mistake. Her father asked her to come closer, gently hugging and comforting her. Her father assured her that everything would be all right, and that if she had made a mistake, she could just apologize later, so she promised him she would. He explained that her mother was very worried right now because of what happened to Lady Dana. Just as Circe was processing this news, she heard loud shouting from another part of the palace. Her father went out to see what was happening. Her mother, Melcia, was in a fierce sword duel with her grandfather. Melchia accused her father of lying, asserting that he had deliberately not saved Dana simply because she belonged to the Grey family. She shouted angrily in his face, accusing him of valuing family honor over a human life, and her grandfather flew into a rage at her for insulting him. Cercia's father closed the balcony windows to block out the sound of the fight, and Cercia asked him in confusion what was happening. Her father calmly asked her not to leave the room, so she asked him the reason for her mother and grandfather's fight. Her father gently caressed her cheek, told her he would go check on the situation, and asked her to wait for him in the room, which she reluctantly agreed to. Her father did his best to comfort her, smiling and reassuring her. But after he left, Cercia felt intuitively that something terrible had happened. Anxiety gripped her heart as she wondered to herself what had really happened to Aunt Dana. Despite her worry for her aunt, her thoughts soon turned to Enoch, realizing he must have been eagerly awaiting his mother's return. She remembered what he had told her before, that if he won the competition, he would be able to live with his mother again. She realized he must be waiting for her return. Anxious, Cercia began to piece together clues about what had happened, remembering her mother saying Dana was injured and that she had been in Crichton all this time, and wondered about the severity of her injuries. A terrible thought crossed her mind. Could her injuries be so severe that she would never be able to return? She anxiously wondered if Enoch had heard the news. Fear enveloped her, worried that Enoch might do something reckless, like run away to Crichton to find his mother. Meanwhile, Enoch was already preparing to leave, determined to find his mother himself. As Cercia would later learn, her father had chosen not to tell her anything that day to protect her, but the very next day, the news of Aunt Dana's disappearance made the headlines of the Ratina Weekly. Thus, Cercia learned the reason for the tense atmosphere hanging over her family, as the disappearance of someone as skilled as Dana in Crichton was a major event, and refugees had even begun to appear. As she read the newspaper, her maid, Gija, tried to stop her, advising her not to read such sad news, but Cercia insisted that she should at least know what was happening in the country. Gija reminded her that she was only 7 years old and didn't need to worry about such things, and asked if she had eaten. Cercia replied that she was waiting for her father to eat with him. Gija told her that Lord Benedict had already gone to their territory to deal with the refugee problem, and her mother had gone to the imperial palace early in the morning. Cercia wondered where her grandfather had gone, guessing he must have gone to the imperial palace as well, and suddenly felt very lonely. Gija tried to comfort her, saying they would all come back, but Cercia replied sarcastically that she wanted to enjoy being alone for a while. At this, Gija told her she wasn't alone and that she was right there with her. So Cercia, deeply moved, turned to her maid and expressed her gratitude. Gija assured her that she would always be by her side. After calming down a bit, Cercia asked her maid if she could visit the Grey family, but Gija flatly refused her request. Cercia angrily demanded the reason for the refusal. So Gija explained to her that everyone in the Grey family believed her grandfather was responsible for Lady Dana's disappearance, and a visit from her at this time would not be welcomed at all. But Cercia tried to persuade her, saying that as Enoch's fiancée, the Grey family might treat her differently. Gija completely dismissed the idea, prompting Cercia to announce she was going to practice her swordsmanship, to which Gija immediately agreed. At the training ground, Cercia felt very sorry for Enoch, thinking she should do something about it. As she stared at the training dummy, she suddenly realized that this dummy had always been by her side, through wind, rain, and snow. It was her constant companion when she felt lonely due to the absence of her parents and grandfather, and she was deeply moved by this. Driven by strong emotions, she placed her hand on the dummy, but to her surprise, the dummy fell to the ground after its base shattered. She was shocked and regretful, wondering why this had to happen at this particular moment. She collapsed to the ground crying, calling out for her parents and grandfather, expressing her deep concern for Enoch and her fear of the monster. Amidst her tears, she heard a voice ask her the reason for her great sorrow. She looked up to find her grandfather standing before her, and she happily cried out his name. She ran to him and hugged him tightly, and he soothed her. She asked her grandfather if something bad had happened at the imperial palace, and he told her that he had decided to give up his title to take responsibility for Dana's disappearance. Cercia felt. Cercia was surprised by her grandfather's calmness and shouted at him, asking how he could say such things so casually and if he realized the danger of no longer being the Duke. He answered gravely that a title does not prove who he really is. He explained to her that only his sword and his way of life could prove who he is, and wondered if anything else mattered as long as he had a wonderful granddaughter like her. Cercia was deeply moved by his profound words about the sword and way of life. Her grandfather advised her to always remember that if she ever wanted to stand tall on her own, she must live a life with a solid foundation. She answered enthusiastically that she understood the lesson. Moved by her response, her grandfather then told her that he had stopped by the court and bought her a gift. Cercia became very excited at the word gift. He gave her a lace hat, which she loved very much. Then, in a serious tone, he told her that he could not visit her often anymore because he was being forced to return to the Kryton Forest. She then pleaded with him not to go, reminding him that Aunt Dana had gone missing there and that the place was dangerous. Her grandfather assured her that Dana would be fine, but she was curious about the meaning behind his words, wondering if he really knew what had happened. He told her that he couldn't explain everything right now, but he assured her that Dana was fine and told her not to worry too much. However, she asked him to promise to come back to see her on her birthday every year, reminding him how sad she had been when he wasn't there this year. Her grandfather laughed and promised that he would definitely come back. Cercia was very happy in that moment when her grandfather heard a strange sound coming from her stomach. Cercia felt embarrassed and told him she hadn't eaten yet, and her grandfather flew into a rage, loudly demanding to know who dared to let his granddaughter go without a meal. To her grandfather, eating was a matter of top priority, so much so that he completely forgot about the Cold War between him and her mother and began to scold them together for their negligence. Similarly, her mother also took meals very seriously, even forgetting her anger toward the grandfather, and was busy apologizing profusely for letting her daughter go hungry. As Cercia ate, she realized that sometimes missing a meal might not be such a bad thing, as this was the lesson she learned from the situation. She remembered her previous life, when she had no family to nag her for being alone, whereas now, everyone was making a big fuss just because she had missed a single meal. Although she was grateful for this love, a corner of her heart still felt uneasy as her thoughts turned to Enoch, realizing he must be very lonely now. Her anxiety grew as she wondered when she would see him again, and she even worried about whether he had eaten. Her peace didn't last long after the maid, Jizha, bid her farewell and wished her good night. Jizha returned to tell her the bizarre news that Lord Enoch had run away from home again, which shocked Cercia. Cercia tried to pretend she didn't care, thinking to herself why she should care about him, so the maid smiled as if she saw through her pretense. Cercia continued her act, finding it puzzling that he would still run away from home at his age. But her true worries soon revealed themselves as she stood alone on the balcony, thinking to herself where he could have gone in such a terrible situation, with refugees everywhere. A sudden suspicion struck her. She gave a sarcastic laugh, realizing the little mouse from last time hadn't forgotten the way and had come calling once more.